Welcome to Iblis Manifestations. There we go, Mr. Jon Schaffer. Sir, it is an absolute pleasure to have you on Iblis Manifestations. I've been really excited to speak to you. I think we're about to have a very special podcast here. So, first things first, how are you doing today?
Man, I'm good, and I'm really happy to speak with you. I've been looking forward to this, so it's an honor.
The honor is mine, sir. Thank you so much. And yeah, man, there's so many things. I know you've done a handful of these kind of interviews and talks, obviously, recently. And I've actually been listening to a bunch of them. But I kind of want to sort of start this off with a bit of a clean slate. First things first, you're just releasing the Sons of Liberty album. I guess it's sort of like a compilation album of the first couple of releases. So maybe we can just start off the conversation from there and then see where we go.
Sure, man. So this has been in the plans for quite a while. The first album, Brush Fires of the Mind, came out in December of 2009. And then, so that was 17 years ago. And then the Spirit of the Times EP came out 15 years ago. And the whole thing was really just meant to be sort of I gave it away for free, and then the people did have the option of buying a higher quality download. But I encouraged people to share it, and they started making their own homemade videos and all that. But it always bothered me because there was programmed drums on it, and that was just to keep the cost down because I knew that I was going to be, giving this away essentially. And that the drums and mix are probably the most expensive part of production. So, I wanted to try to keep the cost down the best that I could. And, it definitely had some kind of an effect because I heard from people in my travels all around the world what it meant to them. And it was kind of shocking. It's not a normal release where you can, sort of track through SoundScan what the sales are and that kind of thing, but it did have some kind of a ripple effect around the world. And so anyway, that was just a passionate thing. I felt like there was a message there that people needed to hear, and it happened. But in these last couple of years, especially since the event 5 years ago, that situation sort of caused it to all disappear. And I was determined for the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence to try to get that done and have real drums on it. So my good friend Jim Morris, he crushed it. Mark Prater is also a good friend, done a lot of work with Iced Earth through the years. And actually, even on the first Demons and Wizards record, he played drums. And so, I knew that he was going to be able to get the job done. And we did that last summer, actually. We did the drums in June of last year. So it's been a steady process to get it ready to have it released. And the idea is hopefully we'll be able to have it land in people's, at their addresses by July 4th. So, and it sounds way better. I mean, Jim crushed it on the mix, but it's just a thing that now I go, kind of in my mind and go, well, I can die now knowing that I do not have programmed drums on any of my records. So got that nailed.
That's for sure, man. No, he did a fantastic job. I mean, it sounds massive. It sounds absolutely massive. I was listening to it. Our mutual friend Dom did me the courtesy of sending me the record, so thank you for that. I was listening to it and I was like, because I had already heard the original and, and obviously I was already familiar with the very first record, as you said. It's been a little while now since that had come out. But I remember, obviously, the first song, Jekyll Island, listening to that, and, it's a real anthemic kind of a song, and it's got riffs, but then it's got lyrics that make you think. I'm particularly a very big fan of the Thomas Jefferson speech right at the end of the song as well, which I think, like the whole thing is just fantastic, so it's got that anthemic, classic, like almost stadium-like heavy metal aspect to it, which many of your work obviously has done over the years, but then also what I like about Sons of Liberty is that it has this other element where it's like, okay, well, what are the lyrics actually saying? Let me go read that. Okay, so there's a little bit of planting seeds for thoughts at the bare minimum, I would say. So how do you kind of reflect on the lyrical content of it now at this point, like 20-something years later, or sorry if I'm getting the maths wrong. I think more like 15, 16 years later. How do you kind of reflect back on those lyrics at this moment in time in March 2026 as we're talking about it?
Well, man, my attitude has changed, not my principles, but I was angry back then about it. So I think that comes through. And now I just see the world, especially with everything that I've gone through recently. I think if I was to write it now in this frame of mind, it would probably be a little bit different. It wouldn't be radically different, but it would have a different edge. I think, I'm certain there's going to be more. That's the thing, and because I feel like these first couple records, they sort of, well, they don't sort of, they absolutely expose a lot of the serious issues that the human race is facing, and so I kind of feel like it would be a good idea to write a chapter of the Sons of Liberty stuff that sort of it inspires and offers some sense of hope, because it can be overwhelming when you really start to see this for what it actually is. And so, I mean, that looking back on it now and going through the process of sort of listening to these songs for the first time in a long time and going through the process of mixing and everything and really getting into it. I mean, it was all very raw, for sure. But there was just real passion there and righteous indignation, I would say. I mean, there's a lot of things for us to be pissed off about, sure, but there was a way, I think, to handle it. And the more understanding I've gained through the years, I'm not angry anymore about this stuff. I just see it for what it is. We're in what humanity is basically fallen. So to be in a situation where you're like, first of all, I never judged any group of people. That's not. I think that because we're all fallen creatures. That's just, if we were angels, then anarchy would work and we wouldn't need to have any government, and it would be great. But we're not. So this kind of it's just growth. The growth that I've had through the years, I feel like has it would be different if I was to approach it now. But I think there's more coming. I feel the creative stir starting to happen, and so we'll see what that looks like. I really don't know, because I haven't played guitar in since the last time that I seriously played any guitar was in the summer of 2020 when Matt and I were doing the Schaffer Barlow project. So, and then everything went sideways. And I have not been inspired or driven to play, but going through this process, I feel like there's some creativity that's trying to bubble. And where that goes, I really don't know yet, but I'm going to fully embrace that. So
I really like to hear that, man. And one thing about you that I think has been very consistent throughout the years, obviously all the back catalog, anyone watching the video can see all the album cover photos behind you, the many things you've released. One thing that I think has always been consistent with you is the authenticity of expression, okay? Like true artistry, and I think the Sons of Liberty stuff, to me, one thing that I really liked about it is that I could tell, maybe from an intuitive perspective, but also just listening to it and paying attention to the time, and I've listened to various interviews you did around the time that record came out. And I think that I can see the element of necessity that's kind of behind it, that urgency of, I need to fucking tell somebody about this. I need to put this stuff out of my system, and I think that there's this thing with especially a lot of us musicians, but also I think generally people who get into this particular style of music, once you kind of start to delve into it from an artistic perspective, there's an element of, I always like to call it being an emotional sponge. I think we absorb a lot more from the world around us and the events that kind of surround us. And it kind of like, we kind of vibrate on a higher level, so like that expression becomes more urgent, but also like you can be very sensitive to certain information, whereas some people might just kind of be a bit callous or even better yet, indifferent towards a lot of things that kind of goes on because they just kind of want to go on with their life, and they don't really care, and the cogs carry on turning, so it's interesting to me to see that even though a lot of people are probably just like immediately waiting for you to like release something, after obviously the events of like the last 5 years or whatever, but like the fact that you're kind of taking your time with that and wanting it to be an authentic expression is something that as a fellow artist and a fan, I can only respect, really.
Well, I appreciate it. I mean, look, man, I've heard people want new music, and my attitude is, I don't want to do new music. I want to do great music, and with real inspiration. So just going through the motions would be to me, it would feel like a cash grab. And that's not why I do this. That's not why I started this. It's never been. And I don't personally care if people like it or not. That's not the point. And that if you're an artist, it's about fulfilling something that's genuine and authentically happening with you, and of course your preferences that people will understand it and get it, and they'll connect with it. But if you start trying to please everybody, you've already lost the plot. So it doesn't matter in the big picture, and that's really my what I'm searching for. Really not searching, but I'm allowing to happen. I mean, one thing I know about me is that the heaviest stuff that I've gone through in my life results in the best art. And this has definitely been the heaviest period of anything that I've gone through. So I'm thinking that something really special can come, and trying to force that, it's just not the way I'm built. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to let it happen naturally. And it's going to be on my time, and we'll see what that results in. But I think I feel like by doing this, when it comes, it's going to be something really special. And that's whether it's Iced Earth or More Suns or both or whatever. I'm not going to I've never done any of this stuff to try to please other people. And so it's got to be authentic. And of course you get in when you create the machine and you're doing the album and cycle and the tour and the new album and all that. Not everything is going to be as inspired, when you've got all these people that are relying on you to keep the machine going. But since all of that's been paused, I have the time to do this and to reflect and try to reconnect with the real artist inside of me and see where that takes me. So I don't, that's the only thing that's important to me. I mean, it would be pretty simple to put the band back together and to go out and, play albums on the anniversaries and all this. I don't want to do that. It's not really interesting for me. Yeah, I could make some money doing that, but, and pretty good actually, but that's not fulfilling. This whole journey has always been about doing something that's authentic and fulfilling. And at the end of the day, as an artist, and I've been able to separate myself out from the business part of being a professional musician. And I think that's a blessing. And I've had a lot of blessings in my life, and the ability to travel all over this world for decades and meet so many incredible people from, all different races and beliefs and, cultures and all these things. And it's just the thing that it has always done is solidify my principle even more, that, the powers that be, they're just there to divide us. That's what it is. It doesn't have, because so many people you connect with, they all want the same thing. It doesn't matter where you go in the world. Really, when you get down to the average person, the majority of people, they want to live their lives. They want to be as free as they can possibly be, and to live their best life, and take care of their families, man. It's just human. So all of these divide and conquer tactics have always pissed me off, and I don't buy into it. And it's only because I've been able to travel. If I would have stayed in, my little bubble and never been able to go around the world and do the things that I've done, maybe I would be easier to be manipulated in that way, and to just have the us or them kind of thing to get into, like a little bit of Roger Waters is kind of always singing about, and Floyd, that it's definitely a game. It's manipulation. And, there's just people that get off on that, gives them power. And so anyway, there's been many blessings in this whole journey, but I'm not willing to sacrifice my integrity or my mission just to go chasing dollars, to put the band back together, and to feel like I need to rush back into this. There's literally no point in that.
Absolutely, man. And you know what? To give credit where credit is due, you have also more than earned the right to have that position. God, you left your home state at the age of 16, just to get Ice to Earth going, and all the many years and the graft that you have put into the band, and I think that, and I'm sure that most fans are probably respective of that, especially when you put it into words in the way that you have done, but I think that's fantastic, so it's kind of like, it's nice. It's actually refreshing to kind of hear that, and I'm excited for you to, at some point, grab the guitar, and see what kind of thing flows out of there. But one thing that you kind of said earlier that really kind of struck with me, considering we're still, you said that you don't feel angry, and that's really interesting to me. I kind of want to dissect that one a little bit, because I feel like, given how things have been in, I don't want to focus too much just on the last 5 years, but generally speaking, I feel like most other people in your situation right now, they would be feeling very pissed off. And that anger, I do feel like, to an extent, not always, but it does stem from some kind of a place of victimhood. Okay. Now, and I can, and I find tremendous strength and admiration, if you can go through fire and if you can literally walk through hell, and have all kinds of things about you like that, and yet you're sat here with me now saying you're not angry, which I do I do take your word for that, but that's powerful, man. How how do you even get there?
I don't know. I do know, but I just have a deeper level of understanding, and that, and it is biblical for me. It really is. It comes down to my relationship with Christ, which I'm not here to push and force that on anybody. I recommend looking into it, but that changed when when I was a kid. I grew up as a Christian kid, and then I went into, and there's a difference between religion and a personal relationship with Christ. And that's one of the things that I think that has damaged the Christian faith is these organized religions and what that has kind of turned what is supposed to be the church, what has turned it into. So that's a whole nother discussion, but just understanding that they're human beings are flawed, right? And so there's no, as much as, people that I believe are doing horrible things to us, I realize that we're all in a fallen state. And the only power, I guess, is to try to share that with people and to sort of inspire people to reconfigure their brains to understand that if we want to live in a peaceful society all over, we need to stop trying to force our morals on everybody else. We need to allow people to live in the way that they want to live. And that means more freedom. It doesn't mean more control. That's the opposite. It's just going to get us into more aggression against each other. And, this is something that my good friend Mark Victor he's the founder of the Attorneys for Freedom law firm, and they were my attorneys. And I've worked with those guys and will in full-time capacity. And now I'm going to be doing some consulting here and there, because with doing a full-time position like that, it's very difficult to try to connect with your creativity. But he's got a book coming out soon. And it's this real, true peace movement called Live and Let Live. And
I was going to ask you about the live and let live philosophy, for sure.
Yeah. Well, so I don't want to get ahead of my skis on this, because it's his book's coming out. So I don't want to go too far into it, but I can just, it is that principle. It's basically the non-aggression principle. He's distilled a lot of ideas, even, going back to our founders and before, and the libertarian non-aggression principle, but distilled it down into a way that is, it's hard to argue that this would be a great solution. I mean, it's hard to argue that it wouldn't be a great solution. It's a really common sense thing that if you can get reasonable peoples from all spectrums, of their political beliefs in whatever country around the world, if you can just, kind of reconfigure your mind to understand that more freedom is going to lead to more peace and more prosperity, not the other way around. And, what the United States has become versus what it was founded as, those are two very different things. And that's the sad thing, is that even when you get into these systems of collectivism that are mandated by the state, whether that's corporatism or socialism, communism, fascism, any of those isms are
Islamism.
Yep. That's an extreme situation. So I've met so many cool Muslim people in my life too. But when you get into like the people that are there's some kind of a personality type that vies for power and control over others, and sociopaths, psychopaths, whatever they are. And that's also part of the fallen state. So while I will peacefully resist those people, but doing that with aggression is not going to be a solution to it. It's going to lead to some other form of aggression and control and tyranny. So the American Revolution was a very rare revolution throughout history, where it did actually lead to more freedom for the people ultimately. Then you can get into the discussion of, well, yeah, but they were slave owners. Okay, but there are slaves now. Slavery has been a system as long as man's walked the earth, and it's terrible. I don't agree with that. They actually didn't agree with that either, but it was a system way before they started to establish this country. And with the Declaration of Independence, many people don't know that Thomas Jefferson actually wanted to abolish slavery in that document. And the committee that was assigned to making the document happen, said that, there's no way that we're going to get all of these people to the colonies to sign on to this when their economies are absolutely tied to slavery. We need to unify, fight our enemy, King George, and then the evils of slavery will go away. So that's something that most people don't get taught. They just think these horrible things about the founding fathers, that they're not perfect. They were humans. None of us are perfect. So perfection is not the standard. It's just that, they did something truly unique in history, and it was one of the very few revolutions that ended in something that did create a space for people to be free. But it wasn't perfect. And I actually think the live and let live philosophy and the movement has, if we can get the messaging out there and get people to understand that, people from all walks of life, from the common guy, the construction worker, up to if there's some billionaires that can embrace this principle, and some political class. And it's just a matter of like, oh, wait a minute, this totally makes sense. But it's really important that the messaging is done properly, and that we get out and do it in a grassroots way. Because whereas like the movement from the peace movement from the 60s was a large, I believe that it was kind of a controlled opposition type of thing that was manipulated right from the gates. And this is different, because there's the legal principle and the moral principle. And if you understand those two, you can't violate the legal principle. You can't aggress. The moral principle is, we would prefer everybody to be an excellent human being, to do the right thing. You don't have to do that one, but you do have to follow the legal principle. And that's there. And there, the aggression is laid out very clearly in Mark's book. And it's not, I think we can all agree that it's wrong to go up and punch somebody in the face and take their stuff. That's pretty blatant, but there's a lot of different forms of aggression. And so, it's, like I said, I don't want to go too far into this, because the book's coming out soon. And then Mark is going to be doing a lot of interviews, and I will be discussing it more in detail once that happens. But I think there's just it's a wonderful philosophy. And, I feel, but I guess getting back to the point of the question is how can I be at peace? I think it's not worth getting upset about things that are not in your control. Your only real freedom is in that little space of something that happens, that the world throws at you, and how you respond to it. Your freedom lies in how you respond to it. That's the only freedom that you really have, is I have a choice how I'm going to react to this. That's my power. That's my freedom. And the bigger that you make that space, the more free you are. So I don't see any point in following everything that's going on in the world. I understand the system. I understand to at least at a fairly deep level. I understand that it's inherently corrupt. It feeds corruption, and that's not good. But getting really angry about it is also, it's just I'm allowing the situation that I don't have any control over to interrupt my peace. And then I've kind of given in to the enemy right there. So the better option is to try to plant seeds of different ideas and an actual solution to these problems, and to hopefully inspire other people to embrace that concept and that philosophy and that point of view. So that, because the only way that this power structure still exists is through our acquiescence. 100%, we're giving it up. And every time that you allow these things to interrupt your peace and take you off mission of trying to make a good difference in the world, to make a change in the world, they're winning, and that's, so it's not an easy path. It hasn't been an easy path for me to get there, but I think that's one of the reasons that, why I went through this. One of the, maybe not the reason, but the biggest benefit out of all of it was that I see things more clearly. And I've learned a lot, through the whole process. And that's my choice. I'm not saying I don't get frustrated about things, but I'm much slower to anger than I used to be. I used to get, like right off be kind of explosive about it, because I was so pissed about the way everything is, but, or the system, but it is I don't really know, man, how it just happened. And I think it has to do with many things, the things that I've studied through the years. Ultimately, I do give all credit to my relationship with Christ. In the end, that's what really clarified things, because after going through a Lutheran school that I did for 5 years, by the time I came out of there, I was, before I went into that school system, I was a Christian. By the time I came out, I was not. I was quite angry. And that's because it's sort of a perverted, the churches have become perverted, or the religions, the established religions. And I just really tend to focus on Christ and Christ alone and his teachings. And it's pretty amazing. And when you have that connection, there is a certain overwhelming peace that it came over me. I'm not saying it's going to do that for everybody. And I respect everybody's right to worship or not. If they want to be atheist, that is the live and let live. You have to if you want to be free, you have to let other people be free to do the things that they want to do, even if you disagree with them. And I will stand up hardcore for those people that I disagree with, for their right to be able to say things and live the way that they want, even if it's not a way that I want to live myself, or that I think maybe is not healthy for them or whatever. But this is where you get into that, when we force our morals into the law and then use the law to go after those that we disagree with, we end up with a complete shit show, which is what we've got, so sorry for rambling, but that's kind of, it's hard to just pinpoint one thing. How did you get there? It's
absolutely valuable, man. I'm listening and enjoying it. And you know what? One very key point to point out here, I think that pretty much everything that you just said there, as far as the key principles of just dealing with other people and dealing with human beings, the way you laid that out, as far as I'm concerned, that is a completely bipartisan issue that can be shared mutually in a rational society by basically everyone.
Yeah, for sure, man. And this is the thing, when you get all the noise out of your life and you just talk to somebody, like I'm not a right-wing Republican, as far as people think that, but that's not really the case. I used to be. And in fact, I bought into a lot of things, and there was a period where I would say I was even a neocon, but then I started to wake up. So, but I don't play that game anymore. I haven't for a long time. And if anybody really looks at, as much as they've tried to marginalize and say that Sons of Liberty is this right-wing extremism stuff, it's nonsense. I mean, it is absolutely just pointing out the facts of the way the system operates, and really the Jekyll Island being one of them. When we have this kind of a horrible monetary system, based on fiat, based on debt, that it's not backed by anything. It allows corruption to blossom in a way that you can't possibly imagine, and that's where, to me, where it really stems from. But if you just have a discussion with reasonable people of different belief systems, politically or in their faith or whatever it is, there's so much more common ground that we all have. There's just so much more, and reasonable people can disagree. And what's happening with social media is, I think it's totally toxic when those things are measuring, even if you just slow down, if you're scrolling, and they're building a profile and they're feeding, and if you click on something, they're going to feed you more of that thing. So it has a way of radicalizing all the different groups, and it's just more divide and conquer. And we need to be cautious of that, because that's not really who we are. And the more that you allow that stuff to be fed into you, and you get this confirmation bias going on that's giving you things that maybe you only believe and are really passionate about a little bit, but then it starts to amplify, and it starts to get, and it's the left, it's the right, it's whatever extreme that can be manipulated into being extreme. It'll keep feeding you that kind of stuff, so that you get more of the confirmation bias, and it's not good. It's not healthy. And I mean, it's going to be a tough battle to try to get people to sort of reconfigure their thought process. But I feel like, we have to try. There's a solid group of people that are already involved in Live and Let Live that are committed to this. And, sometimes it's the people that are crazy enough to think that they can change the world actually do, so it's,
I feel that.
Our founding fathers were a tiny group of people, and they made a big difference. Now, of course, it didn't last. It came under attack pretty early after. But it's just it's kind of the human condition, and we have to try if we want to make things better. And for me, putting out the Sons of Liberty album, going back to one of your earlier points, was I'm a father, and I couldn't in good conscience just sit back and know this stuff and keep it to myself. My spirit felt compelled that I have to get this information out there, because I do care about people, and I care about all people. I don't care, where you are in the world. I'm not an NPC that's just going through the motions in life. I do care about other people, and I want to try to help other people in any way that I can. And that's been the way that I've always been before I became a Christian. I care. So maybe I'm weird like that, but because I do, then I got to do what's within my sphere of influence or power to try to do the right thing. That's just the way I'm sort of wired, man.
For sure. And you know what? I think, that's beautifully put, actually. I really like that. But a lot of people, I think they get trapped into certain things, and perhaps you, from maybe a younger age perspective, can relate that yourself, and certainly I do as well, but it's like you get trapped into certain things because you care. Like, the system knows that you care. It knows that you're going to be outraged by seeing certain things in a certain light, and in the age of social media, when people see for themselves that the media is lying to them, when they see for themselves that they're like, I don't know, let's say, like, people already know the truth of the event, and then when they see media deliberately lying to them, that actually creates more of an outrage, and sometimes I wonder, because it's like they surely can't be that incompetent,
Right.
And I sometimes start to think that maybe even that outrage that's being implemented there is deliberate, because people care about their homes, and I think that I've always said this, you referred to a lot of those isms earlier. I don't think anyone who's in those groups is necessarily a part of that or buying the ideology wholesale, which, by the way, I'm really not a fan of doing that as someone who's particularly for just individual rights and individual liberty. That to me is like the number one priority as far as my own values are concerned. And that also has very much deep roots in my own background, growing up in the Islamic Republic of Iran, and seeing that, basically growing up in a 1984 kind of scenario under the name of Sharia law, and obviously then seeing some like bits of deja vu here in the last 5 years and whatnot. But we can get into that. But to me, it's like that freedom and liberty is the most important thing. But I'm sure a lot of these people who kind of fall into these kind of categories and the extremist groups, they're not doing that because they think they're doing the wrong thing. They're doing that because they're doing the right thing, and they care. But then that's how, through manipulation of information, and most importantly, manipulation of their own thoughts and emotions, whether it's through social media, through various different influencers, they'll end up in that sort of position of actual real extremism, again, not falsely labeled ones,
100%, man. You're spot on. I agree with you. I think that's very valid. And I'm really interested in your story. So, maybe I can interview you for a second here. Is that cool?
Sure, man. Go ahead.
Okay. So the episode that I saw, when did you leave Iran?
So I left Iran in September 2011. Yeah, I left with a BC Rich guitar on my back, with the sole purpose of coming to the UK Birmingham of all places, home place of metal, to continue my band TRIVAX, and as a matter of fact, I did exactly that. I never gave up,
Awesome.
as I know you never did, you know. And funnily enough, you know, one thing we have in common, John, I was also 16 years old when I did that. So
That's awesome, man.
Yeah,
Did
man.
anybody else from your family leave too, or you just
No,
did it on your own?
on my own.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. That's
Awesome,
it, man.
So with all of this mad, because when I saw the episode that Dom sent me, obviously the war hadn't started. But there was the revolutionary stuff was going on in Iran. So were you able to connect with your people after that, or since, or now? Are you able to hear what's actually happening on the ground there?
Well, that's a very valid question, and there's a few sort of multiple dimensions to this that you kind of gotta consider, you know, and I'm sure that maybe perhaps some other people here, you know, particularly maybe from the American audience who had like friends or family members that were kind of serving abroad, you know, maybe they'll kind of relate to this aspect of it. But it's that, first of all, to answer your question, yes, I have heard from people. It's been extremely limited because the criminal government of Iran has shut down the internet. They're not doing air raid sirens or anything. You know, in fact, I don't think they actually mind there being more casualties because that's what they're like. And they know that the more civilians get injured, they can probably use the propaganda to their own terms in one way or another. Okay. And there's a lot about that we can kind of talk about. But yes, I have heard from people, but this is the point that I was going to make, is that in a situation like this, you have to take it one day at a time, okay? Because if your closest family members sent you a text 3 days ago and they were fine, that doesn't mean that that's still the case now, all right?
Sure. Yeah.
And this is the point I was trying to get to, you know, if people who've had like friends and family serve, you know, in like Iraq, Afghanistan or whatever, you know, or if anyone's been in a situation of, you know, like, you know, it's a very bizarre thing that, like, you know, when your family are actually like, you know, they're healthy, they're safe in mind, you know, they're all fine, you know, they just, you know, happen to live under a totalitarian government, you know, but because of that fact, it's almost as if you're like waiting for like a phone call every day, you know? So that's something that like I have to deal with, and I'm not alone in this, you know? I think same as yourself, I tend to only concern myself with things that, not to only concern myself with, but I try and navigate my own thoughts and emotions in a way of, I can only do what I can do. You know, that I'm a big proponent of that, you know, so that's why, like, if it starts raining or if the weather's horrible, you know, I try not to complain about it much. And I know it's a very UK problem, but, you know, I try and, you know, in life, I've always been that way, you know, that I will control what I can control, you know, in spite of anything that happens in the outer vicinity and the outer events that exist in the world. But this is one of those situations where it takes a lot of navigation on a daily basis internally, that, oh fuck, you know, any minute you might get a phone call that's terrible, you know, and then sometimes you'll get a text, or like you get like a 28-second, 30-second phone call, you know, that's cutting in and out, but you get reassurance that they're okay. But then after the phone call ends, it's like, right, now we're back onto the game again. Now it's the waiting game, you know, and to me, I think I just use that as an opportunity to build mental resilience, you know, and just live my life with as much clarity as possible, because it's a very precious opportunity to do that. And it would be a shame to spend it all fucking worrying, you know? So that's kind of my takeaway from that.
That's awesome, man. I mean, I don't want to say that I'm not concerned about this stuff. I am, but I also know that the solution doesn't lie in the, like, working yourself up to a point of getting so frustrated, which I think also is one of the weapons that they use against us. Is there's so much, it's the amount of information and the validity of said information. It's hard to know what's real or what's not anymore. And that is a weapon. So focusing on all of those things too much can make you crazy. So it's like, it doesn't mean that I'm not concerned. I absolutely am, but I think I understand it enough to know that the solution to this isn't like obsessing over the details. It's about trying to work a solution and trying to inspire people to understand and to, just, one by one, the more that you can awaken people, and not in a way that makes them angry. And that's the one thing about the Sons of Liberty stuff, that it probably inspired a little more anger back in the day, because the people that didn't have any idea of the way things that were going or what was going on, but they knew something was wrong. I think that's where we find ourselves. And then there are just some people that are never going to get it. And there are some that are, and some are going to react very differently when they wake up to it. And I want to try to I guess my goal is to, let's be aware of, as much as we can, understand this. I believe that there's a spiritual war aspect of this that is significantly bigger than the things that we can see in the world. But I really still feel like just trying to inspire people to understand that freedom is the solution. That's the way that we're going to get into it. We're not perfect, and perfection isn't the standard. It's never going to be. Not in this existence. It won't be. So that's why, as much as I love the concept of anarchy, it's not realistic, because there's always going to be a group that will take over and will come to power. And there has to be some basic set of rules. And I feel like, but I think if we can limit that to really defining what aggression is, and then don't aggress, it'll just allow the prosperity of the people, and the more freedom, the more prosperity, and the more peace. It's just a fact. So, and I'm all about individual rights. And I do believe that being strong in your borders. And here's the reason that, being a nationalist has been really, like, the term has been dragged through the mud because of the Nazis, but they were National Socialists. So everybody kind of leaves that little part out. It's the idea of keeping control, even here in the States, the way our system is, I would have definitely been with Jefferson on the more of the anti-federalist side. Like, having a big, strong central government is not, to me, that's not a solution. And imagine how scary that would be if there's a strong world government. Now, all of a sudden, what do you do in your country that's halfway around the world to try to make and implement any kind of change that's going to benefit your local community? If you give up your sovereignty to often those kind of systems are going to be an unelected body of bureaucrats. How are you going to fix anything in your local community? We want to decentralize everything even more in the live and let live movement. That's the idea, is to take that so that the power is in your community as much that it can be that you can change. And that's actually the design of this country. But even here we have, like, most people focus on the federal government. That's what all the big news companies, that's all they ever talk about. When actually the solution is in your local community and it's in your state. That's where you're able to affect change. But people have been sort of almost brainwashed into a way of a belief system that everything is all about the federal government. The federal government is God. Well, no, it's actually not. And that whole idea that everything that the founders came up with is to give the local community as much power as possible. And so I think that the live and let live goes even further. And the concept, obviously, I think most of these politicians don't care about anything that the citizens of their country think or believe or want. I think they don't care because they're owned by other interests. But conceptually, the idea was to have it so that you can push for the change that you want in your state house, get the representatives elected that you believe are going to reflect what you want in there, and they're going to vote the way that you would like. that has clearly failed.
Yeah.
And so, but it's a great concept. I think with Live and Let Live, we take it even further. And I feel like in this moment of world history where there's so much unrest around the world and uncertainty and financial collapse is absolutely looming. And as brutal as that's going to be, maybe it's for the better as long as we come up with something that's better. Going into a digital prison doesn't sound like a great idea to me. And that's probably where we're headed. But, these things are coming. There's no question about that. And we're going to have to face it. And what I would rather be alive during this time than the constant, well, it's not my problem. Well, it's going to be my daughter's problem. It's going to be, it's going to be a problem. And I would rather deal with the hardship on my watch than passing it off to my children or grandchildren, any of my family members, or just people in general. Let's deal with this now, and let's get through the hard times so that our kids don't have to. That, I would love to be able to do that. I don't know, what it's out of my control. The only thing I can control is my ability my reaction to things and my ability to try to affect change. And that's only really through inspiring people. I think that's the only effective tool that I have.
For sure. And I think that as a musician, you have the tool of planting seeds and having an emotional connection with people that I can't think of any other profession that might be able to do the same thing. But you know what, just to kind of, I really like your thought process on this, and I think that also it is healthy to be able to kind of look at things like that as well, I know that a lot of people kind of want to sort of brush off the responsibility, or there's a lot of people who think that, oh, well, I'll be dead in 50 years anyways, so who cares? I think that's a very lazy way of thinking, and I generally have a bit of a disdain for that style of thinking, just purely because of the lack of responsibility that it takes on, and then some people kind of, they validate themselves on that strain of thought just through their own self-loathing, or like the self-loathing of the human race, saying like, oh, we're this and that anyway. Yeah, okay, well, does that mean that you now then officially give up on everything and the future of the whole world? No, you don't. You work for it, and this is how we gain our own control back, It's a fun story, by the way. I want to tell you. So obviously, as we mentioned, I was born and raised in Iran, under the Islamic Republic. Obviously, I am very much an ex-Muslim now. I should clarify that just in case anyone's listening to me for the first time. But it's interesting, so I think I was around 7 years old. And then one day I showed up to my school, and then right at the door of the school, it was like this kind of like a solid metal door with like a separate bit in the middle that would open, and then you'd walk through that, and then you'd go into like the school like backyard or whatever. But on that entrance bit, they had laid an American flag on the floor with like a really badly drawn picture of an American soldier on the side of it, and everyone was supposed to like kind of step on that to go in. And I think I must have been the only kid who got screamed at for skipping over the flag, because I was like, there was this other kid that was like screaming at me saying like, you need to step on that. I was like, why? America's cool. Like, why do I need to do that? So I kind of sheepishly just went and rubbed the tip of my shoe on like the corner of the flag and then just ran off,
Wow.
And that was the kind of thing, and I was always very much like that, in my family, we had like family over in New York. And I remember my mother, this is during 9/11, my mother like being worried sick on the phone, like trying to call family members, see if they're okay, and then we even, we were like actually like officially like mourning about like what had happened in America and and things of that nature. And it's it's very interesting to me, the image portrayed on the outside, and then like the lived experience of one person for themselves, but to me personally, as someone who very much believes in and values human freedom and human independence, I've always been very much a big fan of the Constitution. And I think it's like, as you said, humans are imperfect, but that piece of work, that whole document is almost about as perfect as it can be in many ways.
I agree. I agree. I mean, it changed quite a bit after the Civil War, and that's what, in my view, not the slavery part, but there's many other things that changed, that eroded our freedoms here. And I do think my favorite founding document is the Declaration of Independence, but the Bill of Rights it's really an incredible system that they put together, and it's taken a long time for it to be eroded to the point where we're on the precipice now, of something that could be very terrible. But the solutions, if we would get back to that, and look, this is part of sort of what I call the dumbing down, the deliberate dumbing down of the American people through the public school system. I mean, they don't teach you these valuable things. When I go back, and when I was in the Lutheran school, I have to say the education part of that was definitely far better than the public school system. But they don't focus on these important things of real Americana, which if they did, we would have a much more informed populace that would be more ruggedly individual freedom people, which was what but freedom it's scary for a lot of people because they don't want to be responsible for their own actions. And I understand that, especially when you look at the level of kind of the socialist mindset that has largely over, here, I would say you can go back to like Woodrow Wilson, Franklin Roosevelt. You start getting into those things. Johnson took it even further, and that creates a citizenry that's almost under the influence of like Stockholm syndrome. They don't realize that they're captive by having the handouts. And I think the risk also is that we just simply can't afford to live like this. If you and I were to live the way that the government spins, we would be homeless. We would be bankrupt very quickly. But because they have the power of the printing press through the Federal Reserve System, they can just keep printing. Well, most people don't seem to understand that inflation is a hidden tax and it's robbing you of your wealth. And if they officially say it's 3% a year inflation, well, that's a lie. It's way more than that. And they've changed the way that they measure inflation from back in the 70s. So they exclude all these things that affect people every day. So unless you're like, if you're just a saver and you don't want to get involved in the casino of the stock market, you're going to lose money every year that your money is just sitting in a savings account. You will lose. You're going to lose it through your purchasing power. And the fact that they can just keep printing and we're not allowed to audit the Federal Reserve, really? I mean, what is this? It's like it's a horrible system that our founding fathers would have absolutely never put up with, not for a minute. Yeah. And the way that it was all set up was very dodgy, to say the least. So I think there's way more people that are talking about these things now than 17 years ago when the first album came out. But man, I got to tell you, I did there was a band from Syria, and this was back they were called Anarcadia. And
I think I recognize the name. Yeah.
So they were big Sons of Liberty fans, apparently, somehow. And their country was in the middle of the wars that were going on there. And they were able to get in touch with my manager at the time, and they wanted me to do a guest vocal on one of their songs. So I was in Uruguay, and I went to a studio in Montevideo, and I did this vocal thing for them. And it was a pretty raw production, as you can imagine. I'm sure they were living through some pretty intense times. But some months later, I got a mix back, and they took a clip from one of Ron Paul's speeches and put it in the bridge of the song. I was like, nice. Man, this is so cool, dude. Because it was talking, yeah, it was a really cool thing to do because, and that's the stuff that always just helped me want to keep going, because there are absolutely people everywhere that get it, and that they understand, what the United States has become. It's awesome that you understand. And I've met plenty of Persian people through my travels in Europe and stuff that they get it. They love what America is supposed to be. And having lived in that extreme condition with the Islamic Republic, I'm sure even the modern day American system is far better than that. Sure. But it's not what it could be. It's not what it was intended to be and what it started off as. And I would love if we could just get back to that. And, all this talk of the New World Order and all that. Well, if it was a New World Order that wasn't based on corporatism and it was, the idea was to, for individual liberty and sovereignty and those kind of things, I would be more down for. But I know it's not that. And that's why I've always been strongly against it, because centralized power is never going to be a good thing, especially when you're talking about on a global. It's bad enough in a country the size of the United States. Imagine, how horrible that could be if it's run out of the UN or wherever. Especially when it's something that's going to be supported by AI technology that, based on the TikTok database or whatever, tracks your every single move, knows exactly what you're interested in. That's a fucking problem, man. I'm sorry, but totally. Like that, it is. That's not good. Yeah, I agree, man. It's very bad. It's like it can lead to such a dark place, and but they have the people sort of, especially here. I can't speak for everywhere else. I see it in my own culture that they're just like dumbed down to a certain point and naively trusting these things and so willing to give up their freedom for this false sense of security or for convenience. Mm-hmm. And man, it's not going to lead to a good place. I mean, it's obvious that it's not if you're semi awake and if you care about the human condition. So, yeah. But it's what we're faced with. And this is, again, comes back to the spiritual war. It's always been here. It's always going to be here. And I don't know where this is going to go, but all I know is that we have, those of us that have eyes to see and ears to hear, we need to be the point of resistance peacefully, because if you feed into the violent part of it, then they're going to crush you. And it's not like, it's not the solution anyway, because it's just it's going to lead to the same problems that we can continually repeat over and over through human history. So,
no, and through violence, you create victims, and you don't want to make a system like this ever feel like it gets a pass for being a victim when it's not.
Exactly. Dude, you're right. 100%, man.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. And one thing that I always say is as well, like, okay, we're talking about the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Why is that so important? Okay, well, take a look at Iran. I've said this for years. If Iran had something like the First Amendment, or in this case, the Second Amendment, it would never be in the shit show that it is in today. You think if the citizens of Iran had access to guns, if they had the right to bear arms, the government would last more than, 2-3 weeks, if even that? They would have been overthrown like years and years ago. But they don't. And part of that thing that I always like to tell people, as someone who is very much pro-American, or at least pro the spirit of America and the idea of America.
Yep.
I always say to people, look, that's not just so you can go around fucking shooting people or like whatever. It's intended for you to be able to defend yourself against tyranny. And that tyranny can very well be the very government that you've got in charge of that place. So as far as I'm concerned, I mean, look, I wish we lived in a world where guns just didn't exist at all, okay? I actually, okay, yeah, they're fun to shoot, fine. But as far as like a combat weapon, I wish we lived in a world where they didn't exist and we got everything done through fistfights, because you'd end up with a lot less deaths to begin with anyway. But we do. It's a real thing. It exists. So I think everyone should have access to it so that they can protect themselves against the government. I always said that, and that's the situation in Iran. you wouldn't get thousands and thousands of people getting slaughtered over there. More people died in January this year in Iran than anywhere close to what the casualties have been during the war. And that's a very telling statistic as far as I'm concerned. Now obviously we don't know the exact numbers now, but it's quite a significant difference, and that's the oppression of the government on its own people. But another thing that you want to talk about also the idea of nationalism. I do agree that in a modern political context, unfortunately, it is a term that is somewhat stained, exactly as you put it, because of the association with National Socialism, which is an entirely different kind of animal, not a system that I personally agree with at all. But
yeah, me either.
I think that that's obviously putting it mildly, I'm just kind of breaking it down, but the thing with that is, let's say just us Iranians, nationalism is a very powerful symbol of rebellion to us against a government that is literally trying to strip us of thousands of years worth of identity. And that's a very powerful tool to us, and that's why whenever I see people like hating on their own country, I'm like, don't do that. Yes, you can see it for what it is. You can see its faults and flaws, but you got to be proud of where you come from, So I never bought into this whole like victim mentality of like, oh, we won, so therefore we're bad, so let's just ruin and destroy everything that we have worked for, that our ancestors had to suffer to get us through to the point where we are. So I never related to that. The one kind of common criticism that I also have is when it concerns the talk about like things like monarchy, right? You have a lot of people who are full on like globalists, or and I'm not talking about people of an elite, supposed elite tier, but I'm talking about like the people on the streets, the average citizens, who will oppose something like monarchy, yet they will be in favor of globalism in the same breath. So I'm like, right.
That's crazy.
So, right?
Yeah,
So let's break it down. So what you're telling me is that you are against people who are unelected and have absolute power over a nation, but instead what you are for is people who are unelected but have absolute power over the entire world. How does that logic make any sense whatsoever? I don't get it. It's baffling.
I think they don't think it through. They just don't, they're buying into something and they're not really thinking several moves ahead. It all sounds very idealistically great and kumbaya and peace. And I mean, we want that. But going back to your point about the Second Amendment here, I mean, it's when I was on tour, it was on the Dystopia album cycle, and we went to China, and we stayed there for a week or maybe a little longer, and we played in Shanghai and Beijing. And after a few days, the local promoter got to trust me, and he opened up to me. We were in a car heading somewhere, and he made a comment like, "You Americans and your guns. If we only had guns," So it's that's one of the things that, like, obviously, when the founding fathers went through everything they went through to establish the United States of America, they didn't have packaged bologna in the supermarkets. If so, all these people that say that it's for hunting, well, no, I mean, it's not, because everybody hunted back then. If you want to eat, that's what you did. That was like a normal thing. And it's very clear what the founders, when you read their writings, that the whole entire intention of the Second Amendment was the right to self-defense. I'm not a fan of war, but I am a strong believer in self-defense, and God forbid we ever get to a point where we have to defend ourselves over here against the federal government. That's a disaster. That's not going to be a great thing for anybody. And I don't wish that on any other population, but everybody. It's a God-given right to be able to defend yourself, and everybody should be allowed to. So while I agree that it would be amazing if we had a world without guns. My thing is, I don't really understand, and I think this comes down to the Stockholm syndrome kind of mindset, where how can people around the world be so anti-gun, especially those countries where their governments have disarmed them in the past and then murdered tons of them. Like that's what happens. If I was always in the mindset, well, yeah, I mean, I would be willing to consider giving up my firearms if the government did it first, because that's that's not going to happen. It's never going to happen. It's not, there's no chance, but that's the whole point. Like, if you give up that right to defend yourself, then you're going to have a government at some point is going to turn on its own people. I mean, government has been responsible for more death in the history of the world than any other thing, any disease, anything by far, period. End of story. So that's the number one killer of humans, government. So it's just, it's the way it is, man.
Yeah. Yeah, no, unfortunately, it is very true, and that's exactly the reason why we gotta remember that these people work for us, not the other way around, and that's why they should be decentralized and stripped down to the bare minimum as much as possible.
Yes. Well, and that's one of the reasons, like when in Article 1, Section 10, the founders were aware of this, and they went through their own fiat collapse with the Continental, and that's the reasoning behind being on precious metals as a form of monetary of a system, because you can't just create it out of thin air. It would control. I mean, it wouldn't be perfect because perfection is not the standard, but it would. Just imagine if you took away the power of any of our governments to just print currency up, because it's not money. Those pieces of paper or the digits in your bank account, it's not money. It doesn't hold its value. So therefore it doesn't even fit the descriptions of what money is. But that was their idea, was if we stayed on a hard currency, like an honest currency, that it would be very hard to expand the power of government because they knew history. Those guys were smart, man. They were very, very smart people. And they studied the depths of the Greek and the Roman empires and all the different systems. And they argued and fought vigorously over that, over their different positions, and came up with something that was pretty exceptional in the history of mankind. It's not what it was. And I think we have the ability to restore that. But here, because people have been so spoiled, and it's largely due to this fake currency system that they have been able to do this, that I feel like, we're going to have to go through something really bad in order to return to those principles where, if we can. But that was the idea, that to not have a central bank, that even though we had the first bank of the United States, did you know that corporations were not even legal in the United States? Didn't last very long, but from the beginning until I think it was 1803 where it started to get corrupted. But in order to start a corporation, it had to serve the public good, and it had a limited charter. And the first state that they corrupted was, of course, Delaware. And then all the other states followed suit. And now corporations are like the big thing. But that's a part of history that a lot of people don't realize, that they knew, because the East India Company, the power that a corporation could get, and how that could be abused, and how it can usurp government and everything. I mean, these guys were sharp. So they warned us, if people just pay attention to the things that they wrote, and really what the whole revolution was about. I mean, it's all so relevant to everything that's going on today. So whatever we end up coming up with as a monetary system, it's this Keynesian economic system of perpetual debt slaves is the worst thing imaginable for all of humanity. I mean, it's bad because the whole world's bought onto the system. And I'm not saying the gold standard or whatever is perfect, but the idea of trying to keep things like sort of steady when it comes to inflation, and to keep the corruption to a more minimum, because you just can't create gold and silver out of thin air. That was their idea. You can't just make that. It takes a lot of effort to dig that out of the ground. There's only so much, so they can't print billions of dollars of cash and put it on an airplane and fly it to somewhere. Like they can't. They wouldn't have been able to do that. So I don't know what's coming, but we need to have those kind of discussions and get back to that something that is based on scarcity more than just in order to protect ourselves from our own governments, because when they can just print into oblivion, that's a huge transfer of wealth that happens to those that are the most committed to a system like that. And this, the average person that's just trying to live their lives, and then all of a sudden, they have a hyperinflationary event, and anything that they've ever worked for, it's gone, and it ends up becoming a gigantic wealth transfer. So, and it leads to war and everything else, man. I mean, all of these things would be much harder to pull off without a fiat currency system. You wouldn't be able to just be engaged in all these different forms of aggression. It's not just war. I mean, there's, fraud, force, coercion. There's a lot of different forms of aggression, but it would be a lot harder to pull that kind of stuff off if we were on an honest, sound money system, which is what Ron Paul was talking about his entire career. And I think he's one of probably the best politician that we've had in the modern era. I mean, he's really voted no on almost everything. He felt like everything was getting very out of control, and he is absolutely a sound money guy. And but some of those old timers, man, were G. Edward Griffin, who wrote The Creature from Jekyll Island. He's the guy that the author of that book. Then I contacted him when I wrote the song, or I was in the process of writing it, and just
cool.
Got his blessing on. Is it cool if I write a song, pointing to your book and call it Jekyll Island? And he thought it was great. So
that's awesome, man. Yeah. That's a powerful connection to have there.
Yeah. He's in his early 90s now. So, but he's still hanging in there, and he still has the Red Pill Expo. It's once a year, sometimes twice a year. And there was a few times I was invited to be a speaker. In fact, the first year he had it, he wanted me to be a speaker, and Ron Paul was going to be the keynote speaker, but it was in the summer and we were doing a bunch of festivals in Europe, and I couldn't make it, man. And he invited me again the following year, and it was the same scenario where, end up spending the summer over in Europe and just couldn't do it. But an amazing human being. There's a lot of those old timer guys that understood and understand very clearly what the trouble we're in. And I think all we can do is try to echo these ideas and see if they take hold, and just keep going. Is it dangerous to have these ideas? Absolutely. When you're dealing with tyranny, it is. But I think it's got to be said, and just keep it peaceful. Peacefully resist. Do not comply. Don't give them don't acquiesce. Don't let them have control over your thoughts. Think for yourself. Understand the situation, be cautious, trust your God-given power of discernment, which I think is also one of the things that these social media platforms and the toxic stuff that we have in our food and water and stuff over here, I think it really it's a way to attack that power of discernment, whether it's chemically,
Yeah, that's a really important one. I was actually going to mention that earlier when you were talking about like the dumbing down of people. I was going to say it's not just through social media or the news, but literally the water is poisoned. The food is poisoned. And, and I have friends who've toured all across America, and, and they'll be the first to usually say that, oh yeah, like the food that you get, with all the additives and things like that, and then you get all those various different things that I know RFK was trying to kind of get out of it, but I think there's just so much, and there's like so much lobbying behind it, that is kind of like Jesus, like you literally need to like strip the entire system, and the soil is getting messed up in the process. And then you can also potentially kind of look at this from a spiritual angle as well. I mean, obviously there's on one side where you look at people being completely like bankrupt on every sense of the word, whether it's like morally, spiritually, financially, with things like, pornography, which I'm very much against for anyone who's listened to me speak about it before, and like the kind of the breaking down of like that kind of family structure, and I'm not necessarily saying that I'm not necessarily identifying as a traditionalist here either, because I am very much for progress and progression of the human race as a whole, but I feel like that has to be done in line with the best part of our nature, which are life asserting and have got us this far, instead of in alienation to them,
I agree.
And
100%, man.
Yeah. And I think that when you look at something like this, I mentioned like a spiritual warfare, well, what is spirituality? It's only a word that kind of defines and like sort of inserts this sort of a boundary of thought as the way that I see it, because in my world, everything is kind of like, it's all mixed of the same reality that we are all kind of experiencing. And the moment you use that term, it kind of puts a ceiling on it. What I want to do is kind of lift that ceiling and say, okay, well, from a scientific perspective, if you look at it, when you look at like how fluoride can calcify your pineal gland,
yes,
or how certain seed oils and things like that can mess with your gut, and that 90% of your serotonin is created in the gut, and what being inactive does to the body and the mind, and these are the things that I try and preach. This is one of the main reasons why I actually became a fitness coach, is so I can sort of facilitate the tool of movement and creating a better thing, because I always see it in my clients. Obviously I myself haven't been someone who was massively overweight. Now again, for the American listeners, I was like 262 pounds and I lost about 90 pounds off of that, kept it off, got in shape, and now I help other people do exactly that. But one very interesting, thank you man, I appreciate it. One very interesting common thing that I get from a lot of my clients is once they've committed to it for like 2-3 months, then they start telling me things like, it's not just that, oh, I feel lighter when I walk around, or like I feel stronger. They start telling me things like, I can control my emotions better. I have more agency of my own thoughts, that my business is performing better. I'm able to attend to my relationships better. And when we talk about the dumbing down of the human experience and the human consciousness, I feel like that physical element is a very large part of it, which I'm particularly passionate about. And I think that's something that we really need to pay more attention to. So if you want to resist, focus on that. Focus on making yourself in the best possible shape that you've ever been in, physically, mentally, spiritually, or all of them at once, if you will.
Yeah, man, you're spot on. And I think out of all the people in this administration, RFK's just done some amazing stuff, but he's going up against an incredible power of lobbyists, and
I'm surprised he's still alive. I'll tell you. I am
too. I mean, I do pray for him, because he's I think he's one of the good guys, and that's the thing. This is where the whole Republican Democrat us versus them kind of crap. It's there. Does there seem to be less reasonable people on the left than there were 30 years ago? Yes, but I can say the same thing about the right. There's less reasonable people on the right. But I think those two groups are becoming smaller and smaller, the fringe, the more extreme, because they're just, whatever's getting amplified through the media and through social media and all that, that's something different than what's happening in reality on the ground. The one thing that Trump did is he brought in several Democrats, people that were where the party went so far left, they just didn't feel like, people like that it aligned with their values anymore. JFK was a great president, and he was a Democrat, but he loved the country and he tried to do the right thing on many levels. And one of those things had to do with the Federal Reserve. And I think that might've been the thing that did him in the end. So, but you're 100% right. I agree. I haven't used fluoride toothpaste in close to 20 years now.
Wow.
And I do my best. Like I have a distiller for the water because the water is so toxic. And then I run it through another filter system that adds minerals and raises the pH up. But
Smart.
But still, like, even unless you put a whole home treatment on, when you get into the take a hot shower and you're breathing in that stuff, it's really hard to escape it because it's in the air, it's in the water, the food's horrible. But I am a paleo, almost carnivore completely now. So I don't, and I try to get the beef, from like the stuff that you're getting from the big factory farms is going to be loaded with antibiotics and growth hormones and stuff like that. So I try to get, I do get a half a cow every year, and from a local farmer, a friend of mine and I go in on it. And, we know what the guy's feeding his cows with. And so, I mean, I think those things are crucial in this element of warfare that we're dealing with. And also, I wanted to say, man, I am all about progress too. I just think that that's another one of those terms that's been hijacked, because what they call the progressive era, if I look back at what's happened in the last 100 years, there is an element of progress. And then there's absolutely an element of regression. I mean, where we're going backwards.
For sure. Yes.
And they'll say like that it started with Woodrow Wilson, who was a Democrat. But if you actually look at it, Theodore Roosevelt was also a progressive. And some of the things that he did led to this. And I don't think, I mean, when Wilson was apologizing on his deathbed for allowing the Federal Reserve to be created, he knew he was deceived or maybe corrupted, whatever it was, but he felt like he had to get that off of his conscience. And that whole system has led to there has been progress. I mean, I agree for sure in some ways, and whether that's going to end up ultimately being healthy for us when it comes to all this tech and everything else, I don't know about that. I'm kind of skeptical about it, but in many other ways, it's been the consolidation of wealth into a much smaller group of people that has taken place since the creation of the Federal Reserve and the signing of that Federal Reserve Act into law. And I understand the anger of the people, like back when the Occupy Wall Street movement was happening. I mean, I was totally supportive of that because, when we're getting into the system of bailouts for these gigantic corporations that are too big to fail, I'm like, no, they need to fail. If we actually had a free market, which would be, this is where it comes back, circling back to the whole freedom is going to lead to more peace and prosperity. If we had a free market system and not a fascist, corporatist kind of system at the highest levels, those banks would have been out of business because the market would have put them out of business. And that would have been healthy. Instead, we spend trillions of dollars bailing these scumbags out. They give themselves gigantic fat bonuses and go on to commit their crimes and continue to. And this is the kind of stuff that we need to stop putting up with. So I'm not a fan of like any state mandated collectivism, and I'm certainly not a fan of bailing out giant corporations. If we had freedom and if we actually had a free market, then it would be a different world, because then these bad actors they're going to go out of business. They're not going. That's what's going to happen. The market will decide. And I wish we would get to that, because every time the government gets involved in those kind of situations, and obviously it's because they're being paid off, because they've contributed to their campaigns, or probably even worse. And that kind of thing. And if
they're not paid off, they end up going to a hotel room and not leaving there for like 8 hours. And then when they come out, they change their mind and sign something else, so.
Right.
Yeah.
So, dude, I mean, it's just dirty. So I think I don't understand anything other than the only thing I can kind of relate it to is that there's sort of this mass Stockholm syndrome where people have been conditioned slowly over such a long period of time to believe that this is normal. Maybe it's been normalized, but that doesn't mean it's good. That it's not good for us, for the human race, for our people, for our families, for our countries, for peace. So, I don't know. I've had a lot of discussions with some of the European countries, and with people from the European countries and through the years of, and it doesn't seem like they ever really connect the dots. If you say, well, if you're saying that nobody should have guns, or if they have guns and you have to be a member of a gun club and you're only allowed to have 1 or 2 calibers and maybe it's a shotgun or whatever for hunting or doing these kind of things. But yet they're so anti-Hitler, anti-this, anti-that. But how do you think they gain the control to be able to murder everybody? It's like they don't seem to connect the dots when stating this, which almost feels like virtue signaling in a lot of way that, yeah, I'm anti-gun because I want peace for everybody. Okay, I do too, but follow that through. Is it going to lead to more peace when you disarm everybody and the only people that have guns are the government, and the government goes tyrannical, becomes very corrupt and wicked against its own people, which happens over and over? How many times have this happened through history all over the world? It does. Like, there's got to be a balance of power there. The power, in my view, should be with the citizenry. And
agreed.
That's just, it's the only way that you can sort of, I don't know what else it's going to take, to, I don't know, man. I think, there's definitely a movement underway here in many states around the country. They're coming after the Second Amendment like crazy. It's on constantly. And I just see that as why would you want that? What's the motive? Because it's not going to decrease crime. That's nonsense. No. Criminals are going to get guns. If you disarm the honest people, the people that are good citizens that do, take care of their families, they do their thing, they don't bother anybody, you're just making victims out of them. Mm-hmm. That's potential victims. And most assuredly, it'll go badly, especially when you look at the trajectory that we've been on here. So,
well, when you purposely and intentionally exacerbate mental health problems through the use of social media and certain ideologies and what is projected into the perception of people, and then when something goes wrong, you immediately use that and give it all the coverage so you can further exactly that. And then in that process, you blame guns. But don't ever report on who's actually done the shooting, by the way.
And then, and what about Big Pharma's role in all that stuff? Get everybody drugged up on all these antidepressants and whatever.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. But then, you want to talk about it. I'm glad you also brought up the issue of free market, because if it was truly a purely free market situation, as you said, the power would then be with the individuals. Then it would be real capitalism, not some fake version of it that you have now, which is essentially run by corporations, which, by the way, those same corporations are then funding essentially a socialist uprising, which and socialism is just the appetizer or like the lubricant to communism. Okay. And what that does is that it then eliminates the power of the individuals to be able to rise up and compete against that system, that's what you want. You don't want people being taxed to death. You want them to be able to run their own business and gain enough power that they can go head to head with these things, And as you said, that if people had access to that, the Federal Reserve wouldn't even be a fucking thing anyway. So I think that's an important thing to kind of lay out there.
Yeah, all those systems, like they consolidate the power into the hands of a few, and those few never have the people's best interest at heart. They have their own interest at heart, whether it's corporations or a group of like government gangsters or whatever. It's not like something that, and that's really the fundamental ideas behind the United States. And it's kind of heartbreaking to see all the stuff that's going on. I don't know where all this is going, but it just doesn't feel very good right now. It hasn't for a long time. So.
No, for sure. And let's look at it like this. Okay. So you mentioned Hitler earlier, saying like, how did he rose to power? Okay. And like, who's to say that fascist movement ended in 1945? Or like, and I am not talking about like the basement dwellers, who, who think it's like edgy to do the Roman salute or whatever. No, I'm talking about the people who outlived that scenario, and then went into being a big part of corporations, some of the biggest corporations that are currently running the system that we are all participating in. And, you know, I mean, I don't want to name names because I like, you know, I kind of like to, I would like to live a long time. But, you know, but people can look this up for themselves. Like those people, they survived, they carried on, and they're the people in charge of the fucking reality that we're currently living in.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, Oosterbeek, the Netherlands, man, they're, you know, there's a meeting that happens all over the place, but it started there at the Bilderberg Hotel. So, I mean, that's a real, that you're spot on. It's a very real thing. Absolutely. And I think that's ultimately the goal for global government. And, you know, I don't want to live in a system like that. You know, it's just, and maybe there's no stopping it, but, you know, we got to try. And I think if there's a chance of having any kind of a change, and I think a lot of us thought that was going to happen with this administration because of the rhetoric, and it seemed different. And I don't really know anymore about that, but I still think that there is a chance here because of the brilliance of the system the founders put together, that if enough people get it, and we can get people that aren't, I think the issue is there's this sort of like this spirit of narcissism that drives people into politics, and they want to control others. It's like the hall monitor at school, you know, somebody that feels powerful because they've got a, you know, they can walk around the hallways and police other people and push people around. Those tend to be the kind of personalities that gravitate towards government. And it's not really any longer. There's so very few where they go there to actually serve their community, and they stay in for a couple terms and then they go away, because that's really what it was supposed to be. But it's not that way. And maybe like I said, man, I think maybe it's just going to take some really hard times to make the common man that really understands it at a deep level to insist on this, and even themselves get involved, but then step out. We've got to get term limits here are absolutely crucial. Of course, they're never going to vote for that.
Sure.
You know, they want to be career politicians because it's easy street for them. You know, they don't have to send their sons and daughters off to the wars that they start. You know, they don't have to get involved in any of this stuff. It's just a joke. So I don't know, but yeah, the corporatism thing, which to me is really the same thing as fascism. It never did go away. In fact, it's just expanded. It's been a very shadowy in these last decades, but it's emerging, and the scales are falling off people's eyes. They're starting to see things more. So I think there's two sides to the social media thing. You know, if you think about the way things were during COVID, and they put the entire human race on house arrest, and most people just got on their knees and said, yes, please lock me up in my home. Give me more, weird, really weird. I was vehemently against it. You know, they over here, they had arrows in the supermarkets where you could only walk one way, because apparently if you walk the other way, you might get a virus. I don't know what the reasoning, but other than complete control. But, you know, if anybody wonders where I get it from, my mom, she passed away last year. But
my condolences.
Thanks, man. Yeah, it was tough. But I went to the supermarket with her when I was down in Florida visiting her in the middle of all that stuff. She refused to wear a mask, and she would absolutely go the opposite way of the arrows. She just had no part of it. So it was like, you know, it was this little tiny 80-year-old, you know, mid-80s lady, and just like not playing the game, man. And I'm like, that's right. That's my mom. So
I'm with her, man. She sounded like a cool lady that I probably would have gotten along with. Yeah. And look,
sure you would have.
And look, brother, same for me as well, man. You know, I mean, for like the first few weeks of it, I was kind of, I actually caught it because TRIVAX, my band, we did like a UK run just as everything was shutting down. And I'm pretty sure like I got whatever it was from my drummer, you know, because he had already had it for like a few weeks before. And back then we didn't really think about it much, even though you were seeing it on the news. So I think TRIVAX, we must have played one of the last shows in the country before we went into lockdown, like within 5 days.
Wow.
Yeah. Like we played a bunch of shows everywhere, you know, and then I came home and I was kind of like a little bit out of it. But for the first few weeks, I was like, wow, this is kind of messed up, you know, like, and I did follow it, but then I started seeing reports of like police fining a party of like teenagers like thousands and thousands of pounds over here, you know, just because they got together and had a party, and then at in the same breath, then they're talking about things like mental health, you know, which like having a community is like literally one of the best antidotes to mental health, by the way. You know, this kind of stating like a water is wet kind of a thing here, but you know, seeing that kind of hypocrisy and then knowing that at the same time that they were genuinely pushing fear, you know, and the people, you know, they were having their own parties at Downing Street. One thing that kind of frustrated me is when all this stuff came out that they were still having parties at Downing Street in London, was that people were upset that they had double standards and had the party, not about the fact that clearly they didn't think it was enough of a threat to be in lockdown for. You know what I mean? Like, and that reaction really frustrated me, and it still does to this day. It's like, okay, that should tell you, look, government officials, as fucking stupid as they might be, if something was like that much of a threat, they wouldn't get together and have a party. Okay, so yes, the double standard is hypocritical. You should be more angry that you didn't get to see your own sick mother when they were in lockdown. You know, you should be angry that you didn't get to go to work. You should be angry that they destroyed the entertainment sector for a long while, so no one was like actually meeting face to face anymore, and you should be angry that children had a tremendously negative impact on their development because they were not seeing people with their full facial expressions, and they were seeing people with masks. And then there's other stuff that, you know, in RFK's book, The Real Anthony Fauci, he kind of disclosed in details. I mean, the first bit of that book is just statistics of like domestic abuse, suicide, child suicide, these things that, you know, child suicide went up by 50% as a result of those lockdowns, and horrific things that are really...
I lost your audio, brother. Hang on. It's very strange. Hold on.
They're trying to stop us from talking. God damn.
There you are.
There we go. Can you hear me, man?
Yeah, I don't know what happened.
They're just trying to stop us from talking. That's what's happening. But but you know what?
You're right.
Yeah. But just to kind of like bring it back, I want to kind of, you know, because like that whole thing, I think, you know, we can kind of settle on it really, you know, and anyone with a shred of common sense can look back at the whole thing and realize that the majority of us were scammed, you know, and even if they come out after the fact and say, oh, you know, like, we made a mistake and we could have done better, you know that that's damage control, and they've already moved you know, it was like the biggest wealth transfer in the history of mankind, and that transfer has already taken place. People like yourself and I, and I'm sure some of the people listening to this can perhaps take pride in the fact that we stuck to our guns, and we followed our intuition, and we valued personal liberties and freedom above which was imposed on us, you know, which, by the way, if it was actually a deadly virus, which it wasn't, then we could have maybe done things differently, but it wasn't, and that's a fact of the matter. Now, here's where I kind of want to go to, John, you know, because I really want to perhaps spend a little bit more time on your own personal experiences as well. So what did you, and this is like maybe even, you know, not so much even like the political aspect of it, but the whole events that you personally went through with the Jan 6 situation, you know, which, you know, we can talk about like the whole thing, you know, and the million things that was kind of wrong with that whole setting to begin with. But on a very personal level, what did you learn from that about human nature, about the whole experience, but also like the aftermath of it?
Well, I mean, that's a lot. I think the biggest learning part for me wasn't really anything new regarding human nature. And that's probably because I've been blessed to be able to travel around the world for decades and have just been able to meet amazing people from everywhere. But it was a growth process for me. It definitely was a crucible. There's no doubt about that. And I feel like it could have gone anyway. A lot of people that went through J6 have just been destroyed and have, there were several suicides and stuff from, and even some guys that were facing misdemeanors, but they were so like destroyed because of the amount of demonization that was going on in the media. I mean, they were coming out and saying it was worse than 9/11, worse than Pearl Harbor,
I heard that. Yeah.
It's like, come on, man. Really, this is insane. This kind of rhetoric is just it. Every time they do stuff like that, they minimize the actual tragedy of those events. Like you can't, but I don't think I really learned anything new about human nature, just my own, that it was a huge growth process. And I mean, I was still pretty pissed off when I was locked up. But it started to calm. And of course there was a serious level of PTSD afterwards. And I think I'm still dealing with some of that, but not in a way. I don't know, man. I really have to say it's the biggest thing for me that made me calm through the whole thing. Was my relationship with Christ. And it was really I think that if I would have never had that as a kid, that I may not have gone there, but the only book that actually there was a guard in Marion County Jail that came by my cell because I was in solitary for the entire time. But in that jail, it was all bars.
How long were you there for?
I was in 4 different facilities for 3 months. But there were, it was like, it was definitely brutal in the county jails versus the federal prison that I was in. So that you got your guaranteed hour of rec. You could turn off your light in your cell, but it was torturous because in some of those places, the longest place I was at was the old Marion County Jail, which was condemned. I mean, they didn't care about it because they were building a whole new system. So they just the jail was absolutely disgusting. And it was freezing cold, bright lights 24/7. And, I was next to suicide block for about 5 weeks, I guess. I mean, you sort of lose track of time in there. You don't know what time it is because you don't see any sunlight at all. But that was next to suicide block. So you're having people that are like screaming and multiple personalities, and it's all coming into your cell. It was like being in Arkham Asylum. So like massive sleep deprivation was going on. And, but that there was one guard that came by and he slid some literature under my cell door and he just said, "Stay strong, brother," and went on. And I was like, and it was literature on the Daniel in the Lion's Den from the Bible. And so I read that, and then I requested a Bible because it was really the only book that I could get. We were denied library access. Well, anybody in solitary in that system was denied access to I couldn't even get to the law library, which is a constitutional right. I mean, there were so many of our constitutional rights that were thrown out the window in the whole experience. But, once I got to the prison in DC, I was able to get some books, and my attorney, my friend Mark, he had recommended a few for me to read, and my girlfriend at the time ordered those and had them sent to the prison, and I was able to read that. But once I started reading the Bible because it was really the only book I had that in that early part of the process. I really was focusing on Jesus's words, not the rest of it so much, but just on Jesus's words, and it started to really resonate with me. But I hadn't really committed. That wasn't until probably a year after I got out, and then once I did, it was like there was this interchange that took place. It wasn't immediate. It was slow, but it started to happen. And at one point it was just, this overwhelming peace that came over me that I can't explain it. I mean, it really was, it was supernatural. And and as my relationship grows in that way, it's just more peace, man, more resolve, but more peace, and not anger out of the situation or at the situation. Yes, it was unjust, but there's been many injustices against individuals through the history of the world, like billions of them. So I'm not going to sit back and cry myself a river over that. It doesn't make any sense. There's horribly unjust things going on right now all over the world to many different people. And I don't like that, but I also know it's out of my control. So do I drive myself into a fit of rage every time I think about all the injustices against innocents, the things that are happening to children? Dude, that's where I have to catch myself, where I start to get worked up when I think about children being abused the way that they are. That bothers me as a father, but just as a human being. Like, that's a no-go zone. There's a code in prison for people like that. So even the most hardened criminals have a soft spot for children, and if you're one of those guys and you go into prison, you're gonna be dealt with. You're gonna get justice in there.
Seems fair to me.
Yeah. So I mean, that's probably the thing that I struggle with the most. That in terms of like feeling myself rise to anger is when I hear about or see things that are happening with the children. But still, even at that, I'm way more just I don't even know if it's me that's in control of my emotions or if it's just my relationship with Christ that's allowed me to see things more clearly and to understand more of a bigger view of what's happening and the fallen nature of mankind. That it's certainly made me more forgiving, man. I can tell you that, like I have forgiven, because it's also, I think when you start to see the bigger picture of it, you understand that you also are a fallen creature and you make mistakes, and it's not really fair for you to judge other people. So that changes. And once you do that, I am a sinner also. You know what I mean? I've made mistakes. I've done wrong things, and everybody has. So I'm not going to, stand up on my high horse and start coming down on everybody. I mean, the children, that's another thing, right? That's like a whole nother level, but everything else outside of that, it's just, there's a level of forgiveness that I never had before I became a Christian. Like before the change happened in my heart, I wasn't even capable of it. I'm not saying I didn't forgive people, but not like this, not to the point where you really let everything go. And, even with my parents, there's a talk show guy named Jesse Lee Peterson. He's a black guy from California. He's amazing. Mm-hmm. Like really, he's a really exceptional human being. You can just tell by the way he interviews people and stuff. And, he was saying, you have to forgive your mother. You have to forgive your parents. And that stayed in my head. And I just, that came back to me several times. And I'm like, well, am I really holding any grudges? And I thought, I think I probably am. And I went out to my dad's gravesite and, I forgave him and I apologized for judging, but I loved my dad. My dad was the best man at my wedding. So it wasn't really, but there was some issues with my mom, even though my mom and I were close, but I called her. Fortunately, I did this before she passed away, a good while before she passed away. And I just said, Mom, I just want to apologize for judging you. And I forgive you for any of the mistakes. And it was not just words. I meant it from my heart, because finally that conviction was on my heart. It was one thing hearing like Jesse Lee Peterson talk about it, but then it was almost like that inner voice was telling me, no, that's where it's at. And then when I did that, that was when peace came over me. It was like, that's part of the process. That's like the first step with my journey with Christ in my heart. And it led to that. And that voice, I've been following my instincts more. Well, our instincts do deceive us actually often, but whatever the conviction on my heart was, I was following it and listening. And when I've done that, it's been a big progression, like in terms of getting towards kind of a perfect peace. As much, I'm not there, but I'm pretty close, because I don't allow things to rattle me. Because I understand this, and my friend Mark helped me understand that too by recommending a book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And in there's that response. That's your power. That's your freedom. How do you respond to the things the world throws at you? Because it's when you're impulsive, you get into a road rage incident because of some stupid thing, like the way somebody's driving. If you allow that to interrupt your peace, that could land you in prison for a really long time. So, I think it takes going through something this heavy to help you recalibrate your mind and reprioritize your thought process to be able to just take things. I don't get mad in traffic anymore. I don't if somebody cuts me off, it's like, okay, whatever. Why am I going to give this situation the power to interrupt my peace? I'm not going to. It takes a lot to do that now. Like it would take, like I said, the only thing I can think of that I start to feel my blood start to boil is anytime I hear about these horrible things that have happened with the children. And regarding powerful people, I mean, one thing that would happen to help many people around the Western world, maybe everywhere, is powerful people need to be held accountable for their crimes. And we don't have that. That's a serious problem. And I think that if there is any desire whatsoever from the people in government to have the temperature get lowered and for people to start believing in the system again, is to believe that there is a system of justice that's blind. And it doesn't matter how wealthy you are, who you're connected to. If you commit the crime, there's going to be justice. And that's the kind of thing that I feel like I wish that would actually happen, that there would be some accountability so that people would start to feel like, okay, it's not all rigged against us, the average people,
That's absolutely powerful, man. That's actually beautiful, And then what's interesting to me is that what seems to me as I'm observing what you said is that you kind of in a situation where you could very much have been, woe is me, I'm carrying the weight of the world. You essentially chose to dissolve the ego and focus on the suffering of the greater picture, which to me, that's a valuable thing, man. That's very powerful.
It didn't happen. It was not an immediate thing. It was, I have to give all glory to God there. Really, I just do, because it was that started the transformation started then. I think I had to go through that, for whatever, I don't know, I've just relinquished any kind of control over anything other than my reaction to things that happen around me. That's the thing that I can control, is my reaction space. But in terms of what it is, my old self might have felt the need to go and immediately jump back on the album tour thing and to sort of validate my ego. But I'm not there. I'm not going to do that. Everything has changed. My heart's changed. So it's not about self anymore. It's just not. I wanted, when I say I want to do great music, I really mean that. Like people want new music, but new music doesn't translate to great. It just means new. Well, I've got plenty of ideas that I could string together from that have never been, worked up in the studio and all that. But I feel like something's coming. I feel like there's something that's truly inspired, that's bubbling below the surface. And I need to, actually, my plan is to head out to Sedona, which is the last time I took a break was 2018. So I haven't had a vacation since then. And I do that. I go like 8 or 10 years without taking a break, and then I burn out. Then I have to take like a month to just totally get recharged. And I did that in 2018 and did some serious hiking out in the mountains, desert, and in the desert of Sedona, and like, camped under the stars by myself. I know the terrain really well out there, so I can completely get lost there's no humans around. It's just me and God, me and the universe. That's what I did before, and it was great. And that's my plan, to do that again, so that I can put really all of this stuff that's happened, like just put it away and reconnect with try to revive that artist that I know is still inside of me, because things are starting to happen. And in terms of like I can feel it. I don't really know how else to put it, but because I don't know, I believe that music is an art, is a God-given gift, which is why I find AI so disgusting. Frankly,
Sure.
If somebody can just feed some lyrics in and create a song and prompt it to sound like this band or that band, that is a gift from our, however you want to define our creator. That is, art is a God-given gift. There is no question about that. And this transhumanist agenda, where all of this tech is like becoming everybody's God, is, call me crazy, but you read the book of Revelation and it's like, some of this stuff feels like it really applies. So I don't know, but I just know that I will never use that in regards to music. It's a no-go zone. And, but that makes me want to even be that much more like connected with that. I want to try with God's help. I want to revive the artist that's inside of me. And I feel something trying to happen. And if I was to stay on the current hamster wheel that I was on, as much as I love what we do at Attorneys for Freedom, like I wouldn't have the time to be able to go out and do this kind of a trip and to reconnect and to see what is there and what's going to happen, because this is me again, trusting that the conviction on my heart. I hate to say instinct, because, I trained in martial arts for quite a while. And when, one of the things that I learned is that your instinct is always to get really rigid and tense up. And if you're doing a martial art style that's more of the element of metal, then yes, you're rigid, but you can if you understand it and start to really get into whatever art style that you're doing, you understand that you can defeat the rigidity with fluidity. And that's a really crucial part of it. So there's certain elements, and this is one of the things where one way I think that our instincts actually betray us. So I want to be careful about the words that I use, because it's often our instinct in the fallen state to react aggressively over something silly and to be like impulsive. So those are instincts that aren't healthy, but listening to a conviction that's put on your heart by, in what I feel is in a supernatural way, that's something that I need to pay attention to. And so even though our power of discernment is constantly under attack, I feel like I still have it. Like I have a good bullshit detector, man. Like if I feel that there's something inside of me, that it doesn't mean that I can't be deceived. Don't get me wrong, but it's a little harder because I've been honing this for so many years that I feel like I immediately trust when there's a bullshit detector going off. It's when I saw your interview, or when you did your podcast and Dom sent that to me, I knew that you and I were going to have a great conversation, and we're going to probably build a friendship that is probably going to last a long time, because I could see in your eyes the passion, that drive for personal freedom and liberty. You could tell with the way you are that you get it. And that's awesome, man. So I was really looking forward to talking to you, especially with your background and going through what you went through. Dude, that's the stuff that forges you in fire that a lot of people will never have. It's a blessing. As hard as it can be, it is a blessing, because it feels like you're being built up and going through something for something else, for something bigger and beyond yourself. And the more people that go through those experiences, and we can kind of like share these ideas and these principles with each other and learn from each other. This is the kind of stuff that I hope that gets amplified, man. And we see more and more of that all over the world. Then we can change stuff. We can really do it. But
absolutely, brother. Absolutely. This is the way. And listen, man, the feeling is first and foremost absolutely mutual here. I'm very much enjoying just talking to you, and just, I think, you mentioned, like, just to quickly touch on that, because I don't want to make this about myself, but, like, to me, I feel like we have a lot of things in common, interestingly enough, actually. But one thing that I kind of looked at, and this is a realization that I kind of landed on, especially more recently in my life, is that for a long time, I used to see the fact that I was from Iran, obviously still very proud of like my heritage and my background and the history of the place that I come from and everything my ancestors have done just for me to even be here breathing and speaking, But I always used to see that as like extra baggage. Like, okay, I had to grow up in an environment that was like heavily totalitarian. It was this and that. I saw some very unpleasant things in school. I've had knives pulled on me. I had an AK-47 pointed at me when I was 19. All kinds of like different things that kind of, I think it's very easy to feel like a victim about, although, I don't know if I necessarily ever felt like a victim as such, but what's interesting is that every sort of event, every obstacle, when I look back at it in my life at this point, I can say with absolute clarity that I see every single one of them as brilliant opportunities for growth.
Yes. Right on. Good for you, man. That's the way to view it, because that's actually what it is. It really is.
Absolutely.
It's a bitch to go through at the time. But usually on the other side of that, you can see the light at the end of the tunnel, and that's a decision. Some people don't, and they choose to stay either in the victim mentality but really that's what it is. I mean, that's really what it boils down to. But then, if they do, they often go and repeat the same bad things over and over, or the bad behaviors, and don't grow from it. And I've just decided, well, like I said, I don't know how much of this I'm actually in control of. What I did really was surrender. And then things started to change inside. Like I just knew that I could not, as much as I did from the time that I left as a teenager, and that I always believed that it was from my own conviction and from my determination and drive and all that stuff. There was none of that was going to help me get through this last process. I mean, I can't say none of it, but it had to come through surrendering and just realizing that I can't fight this alone. I can't change any of it. So I need to just surrender to the situation and be at peace with whatever is going to come. And that it's crazy, but going into court, into the sentencing date, I was really nervous, like on the drive there.
I can imagine.
Out to DC. And then I got there 2 days before, because the last thing I wanted was for me to have a flat tire or a engine problem or whatever, and then be late for sentencing. So I'm like, it's better to get there early, and then, whatever. So I went out to Arlington because I wasn't allowed to go in the district. which is silly. But so I went to Arlington and I went to JFK's grave and spent some time there in some pretty heavy thought. And that first night, I went through a weird event when I was trying to sleep, and like violently shaking, totally uncontrolled. I crashed hard, and then I woke up, and it was weird. My body was just like shaking, and it went on. It felt like forever, but it was probably a minute, maybe 2 minutes. And the next night it happened again, the night before sentencing, but it was much shorter. And then when I went in, I was totally calm. Like when I woke up in the morning, I'm like, hey, it's whatever it's going to be, but I was totally at peace with it. So I guess that's what I'm saying is like the more that you surrender and stop trying to resist what the world is throwing at you and go with it, the more powerful you become, actually. And it's not of your own doing. There's something else. I don't really know how I can describe it in the way that I feel like it's my personal relationship with Christ. Whatever it is, I believe that, but you don't have to, and nobody has to. But there's something to be said about that, just surrendering and letting, my friend Mark has a saying that the obstacle becomes the way. And I think it's from Buddhism or Hinduism. But or it might be Stoicism. He's a Stoic.
Yeah.
But there's so much truth to that, and when you don't fight it and just allow it to happen, there's a peace that grows over you. Because if you're constantly trying to resist everything the world throws at you, you're going to be miserable. I mean, you're going to be it's going to be a constant battle. And it took me a long time to figure that stuff out, man, and it's not like I got everything figured out. Definitely not. But some of the big stuff, I feel like I've got a better handle on it than I did I have a way better handle on it than I did before J6. So in that event, I view it as a blessing. As bad as it has been, it is a blessing because first and foremost, my relationship with Christ is the number one thing. Everything else, it's like, yeah, there's fallout still from a financial thing and all of the different things that happened from it. But it's really been an amazing journey, man. I mean, I think there's great things ahead. Well, I know there are, but I don't know what it's going to look like. I really don't know. I just know that I feel the creativity trying to come, and I need to give the space to allow that to happen and really truly just get out and reconnect and let go of everything that has happened, and which I think I've done, but not enough to really allow the creativity to come back. So I don't know. I'm going with the flow, and my spirit's convicting me and saying, you need to do this. And I've been doing that lately. And when I do, it seems to feel very balanced, even if there's a perceived risk in the world. I'm like in terms of, well, I'm not going to have the steady income because I'm changing careers and I don't know what that's going to be, or I'm trying to revive my creativity. I have faith. I have trust that there's a reason that I'm feeling this and I'm going through with this, and it's going to work out great. I really know, I know it will. I just don't know what that's going to look like, but that's part of surrendering. So.
Absolutely, man. And you know what? I think to perhaps conclude that point, one observation that I have of the human experience as a whole, which I wonder if you can relate to, I see us all as vessels. Mm-hmm. And this is a vessel to a spiritual nature, to a spiritual trajectory, if you will, or a frequency perhaps, like for example, you've got, like let's say spirits that are of a pro-human, for life, for liberty nature, that are in line with nature, and then you've got kind of the opposite. And this is, by the way, very much described in an ancient Iranian religion under the name of Zoroastrianism.
Okay.
So in Zoroastrianism, you've got basically that aspect of dualism, that you've got the good and evil that exist both in the physical and the spiritual. Okay, so it's not like the two are kind of separate. It sees it all as like one spectrum.
Yep.
And to me, I think that by fine-tuning your thoughts, or like by tuning yourself, or more importantly, as you kind of put it, tuning your heart to a specific frequency allows for you to project that kind of reality to the world outside. You know, it's as within, so without. And I think that there are activities, like literal physical activities, that can change that. You know, things that you can turn into habits. You know, like for example, for me, one of the many things that helped with this, alongside my own train of thought, alongside with losing weight, alongside with getting shape, alongside with not watching porn, and all of these things, which I have very much done, I want to say religiously, for the last 4.5, 5 years, was not drinking alcohol and abstaining from that. Because that essentially is, there's a reason why it's called spirits. Okay,
yes.
There's an ancient nature to this, and also why, you know, even in an Middle Eastern context, you've got a drink called gin. A gin has its very own definition in Middle Eastern philosophy and mythology and religion and a lot. So to me, one of the things that I noticed is that abstaining from that helped me have clarity of spirit. Okay, because certain experiences, and this will be anything from sexual experiences to any kind of emotional experience or whatever it is, they leave you vulnerable and open. So what you surround yourself with, what you allow into your space in those moments of vulnerability, by the way, lashing out and anger are very much moments of vulnerability, you know, where your vessel is kind of like the doors are left open, you know, where other things will be able to come in and take over. And that's what drinking spirits is. Essentially, your vessel gets overcrowded with other spirits and entities that get to basically manifest themselves that way. That's why a blackout drunk, now there'll be a scientific definition of it. There's also another definition on a different layer when looking at the same thing that shows you that because other spirits are overcrowding this vessel, the main driver decides to step back, you know, and then you can start to talk about near-death experiences and how people have seen their own body from a distance, you know, but then that also aligns with astral projection and lucid dreaming, something which I, by the way, experienced at a very young age and had the same experience whilst being perfectly healthy and alive. So there's this element of, I think, once you kind of understand that the human experience is of that level of the vessel type of nature, you know, like for example, one person is never gonna be good or bad, for lack of a better terms to define them, permanently. Okay, so like one politician that you believe in at one point in time for one term isn't gonna be permanently good, nor are they gonna be permanently bad, because they're human. And that's the whole essence of being a human, is that you're open to whatever spirit is that is going to have some kind of influence on you. And I find that usually what kind of defines that is your day-to-day habits, but also where you're willing to make a moral compromise. I think that's a very much defining thing, you know, like where are you gonna sort of say it's okay? Like let's say you're talking about children being harmed. Is there any instances where you're then gonna be like, oh, you know what? Well, that's not so bad as long as da-da-da, but you know what I mean? And then that will allow for certain things to come and take over your vessel and do your action upon you, you know? So I think a person's legacy is not gonna be defined by it should never be defined by one action or one act that they do, whether it is good or bad. It's a process of showing up day to day and knowing that in your heart of hearts, you are trying to be your purest, most powerful, but also most peaceful and awake self that you can ever be.
Yeah, man. I mean, I agree with what you just said. What was the name of the Persian religion?
Zoroastrianism.
Ancient Zoroastrianism.
Yes. Have you looked it
Is
up?
that ZAO?
Yeah, there's two different spellings for it. You can just write. It's either so ZAR or ZOR. You know, you'll find it. You know.
Okay.
But yeah, that's there are three main principles to that: Pendarenik, Kerdarenik, and I think Afkarenik or something like that. But sorry, I my Farsi is really like rusty. But basically, it translates to good thoughts, good deeds, good words, and that's the founding principle of the ancient religion. And actually, at its core, it's the Zarathustra. You know, so if you ever read Nietzsche's "Thus Spoke Zarathustra." Zarathustra is essentially, for lack of a better term, the prophet of Zoroastrianism. Although I very much look at it more so as a strain of philosophy rather than a religion or like an organized religion. You know, I'm actually somewhat opposed to the Iranians that later turned it into like the governmental religion of the time. You know, although nowadays it gets referenced quite strongly as a way to battle the current Islamification of Iran, you know, as a way of like going back to the roots. Same way that I think a lot of Scandinavians, you know, kind of embrace their pagan heritage because that's what they believe kind of was there first. But I think if you look at it as a philosophy, it is pretty spotless, you know, and I think actually very much is aligned with the whole live and let live philosophy that you were talking about as well, where it like prioritizes the individuation of the microcosm, you know, and individual liberties, you know. So that's very much something that I'm for, and then to me it's all about the vessel, you know. So you have two polar spirits or for lack of a better term, deities in Zoroastrianism. You've got Angramanyu, which is the evil one, and then you've got Sepantamanyu. Okay, you've got Ahriman, which is essentially like a manifestation of Angramanyu, and then you've got Ahura Mazda, which is the spirit of the good, the spirit of the God and the universe. And to me, for as long as I live, I will absolutely try my very best. Not try my very best. I will make it my every intention to know that every action that I take, everything that I do and say is in the spirit of Ahura Mazda, which is the spirit of good. Man. Yeah, man.
Yeah, it sounds like probably the Taoism with the yin and yang symbol. It sounds kind of similar in terms of the breakdown of the, you know, negative energy, positive energy, whatever, you know, however you want to say it. But it sounds very interesting, you know.
Sure, and you have to understand that. Sorry to interrupt your flow there, brother, but like you have to understand that like a lot of these ancient religions and faiths, you know, also had various different influences on one another as well, you know.
Sure.
And to me, I'm kind of at that level where I'm like, I think what matters is the frequency that you tune yourself into. So not so much even the label of a specific religion, because you can possibly arrive at the same place, you know. Because to me, it sounds very much, without being overly presumptuous, it sounds very much like you and I are more or less like arrived at a very similar place in terms of, you know, at least that kind of trajectory, you know, and what's necessary. But yeah, it's all very, very fascinating to look into. But just to conclude, sorry, I'm rambling a little bit. Just to conclude, I think it comes down to the fact that human beings are vessels, you know, and we are going to be very much defined by the kind of spirit that we allow into our hearts.
I agree. I totally agree. In fact, I stopped drinking. I haven't had any alcohol in, I guess it's been three years now. Wow. And even when I got out, I barely had any. My friend Gene Adam, who was the singer on the first album, and he was in Purgatory back in the 80s. And he when I got out, and was waiting to be sentenced. I went to Florida so that I could be closer to my mom and my daughter, and Gene and I were hanging out and stuff. And every now and then we would have, a few glasses of sangria. Nothing heavy, because I used to be a pretty serious whiskey drinker back in the day. And, but I would find that I was like just depressed for a few days afterwards. So at some point I just decided, it's not why, it's not, I'm just not doing it anymore. And I think that was also part of the change that took place. And I just I don't even have any interest for that. There's no, it's a really interesting thing that this fullness came over me, that the things that I was into in the past, they just aren't important anymore. Like whether, I would always have these different hobbies and things that I would buy and feel like it was somehow fulfilling to buy these things, whatever collection, whether it was like comic books or whatever. And it's just not there, so there's definitely something very powerful about that, keeping your thoughts in check and what you allow in, and I agree with you about the pornography thing. I think it's just very toxic for people that get sucked into that and get into you're allowing some dark stuff in.
Yeah.
I have to say, if I was to physically witness somebody hurting a child, I'm pretty sure I would have to get involved and do some damage. And that's something that I'm not going to be able, but the stuff that I see, it concerns me greatly. It pisses me off, but I don't think that if I was able, or if I was in a situation to visually see something like that, I don't believe I would be able to just say, I'm going to call the police, and I don't think that's possible.
No,
I mean, you got to do something about that. So there's just some things where being like allowing your thoughts, or not being reactionary and impulsive based on things the world's throwing at you. That's one thing. That does not mean that you become a pushover when it comes to injustice. When there's certain things going on, you got to step in and do the right thing. That's normal. It's just like the basic right of defending yourself. You have the right to defend others too. Mm-hmm. If there's something going on, if there's a public shooting happening, I'm going to run into the fire, not away from it. I'm going to do everything I can in my power to stop that person. It's just the way I'm wired, man. Always has been. So that kind of thing, I guess I want people to understand that my current state, it's one thing doesn't negate the other. Being at peace and realizing that you don't have any control of the things that are happening, but that in that kind of a situation, you do have the decision to make of how you're going to react to it. And my reaction would be to try to stop innocent people from getting hurt, regardless of the situation or the danger that you get into with that. So
I'm totally with you on that, brother. And as far as I'm concerned, that is the responsibility of every man. This is why you need strong men. And then this is also by extension, like I always try and help people, give people as much free advice as possible, even though it's my job to get people in good shape. I always try and put as much stuff out there as possible to inspire people to do better, because you need that. The world needs that. The world needs strong men who can stand up to the goddamn fucking tyrants that run the show, their time is up.
Yeah, so I think that's why men have been under attack in so many different ways, because, you go back and look at just from a United States perspective, and there's been many examples of this throughout history, but from our founding, those guys, man, I mean, they wouldn't tolerate they lost it over a 2% tax increase. Right? Now look what's happening. It's insane. So yeah, I mean it. Well, I think this is the point that we're in, right, in history, where the weak men have created good times, and or the good times have created good weak men, and so we have a lot of weak kind of beta males that are in charge of things that they shouldn't be in charge of, and that's going to create a collapse scenario where the strong men are going to rise again and do the right thing. I mean, that seems to be the pattern that we have throughout history. But
and to me, once it comes back, as long as it's not centralized, no problem.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the trap, dude. That's the thing. And with this level of conditioning over decades and decades, that's my concern, because I don't want to have, I would love us to not go through a collapse scenario and not have all of these issues that we're facing. But when you have people have been indoctrinated for such a long period of time in a pretty creeping, slow, unrelenting way, that my concern is that what the reaction is going to be of the people when they go through something like this is exactly what you just said. We're going to be looking to some kind of central power as the savior of everything, instead of, that's always the concern when you go through these kind of things. And well, let's hope it doesn't happen that way. I would hope that whatever, my wish is for every individual to be the iron-fisted dictator of their lives, and that would be the kind of the ultimate scenario that, to me, that is going to lead to more freedom. Like you are in control of you, period, end of story. That's where it lies. But there's a lot of people that want to sort of shrug off that responsibility, and it is a responsibility. Freedom is, you have to be responsible with whatever levels of freedom, the maximum amount of freedom possible. That's what I'm into. I mean, I realize that we can't have we have to have some kind of a system of laws, because people will aggress, because people are flawed and people make mistakes. And that's where the trap is. If you start looking at the scale a little bit differently, it's what I hate about the term left and right. Like right is Hitler and Mussolini and fascism, and left is communism, but it's all totalitarianism. So why don't we change the scale up a little bit? And I don't care which side you call what, but if you say the far right is 0% government anarchy, and the far left is total 100% government control, if you look at what the founders did, it was just a little bit left of anarchy. That was the idea, to have as much freedom as possible, but you still had to have rules, because human beings, men, are not angels. So there has to be some kind of structure. That I don't see another way around it. And I wish it wasn't the case, but it is. So this is always the thing. And they were concerned right from the gate whether this constitutional republic would actually last, because it seems, throughout history, that these kind of things, they go, and then when you get into the situation where we hear all this talk about democracy, and it's democracy, even though this republic, as it was founded, uses democratic mechanisms, it was designed in a way to protect itself and the people from a democracy, because a democracy is, if you have a straight up democracy, it sounds great, means it makes you think that everybody has a voice. But if everybody doesn't get the information and they're able to be manipulated, then you have 51% of the people that can take away the rights of 49%. And that was the system that these guys set up to try to keep us from sliding into. Because the idea behind it was that 99% of the people cannot take the rights of 1%. That was the concept of the founding of the republic. And but they always fail eventually. I mean, I think ours has lasted a really long time, and I hope that it continues to. But the further that we slide into that concept, and especially in an age where there's so much fake news everywhere, fake misinformation, disinformation, whatever you want to call it. The people are very confused. They don't know what to believe anymore. They give up. So if we don't have like a way of providing real information to the people to make good judgments, then democracy is really a bad idea. So they put up this system of checks and balances with the three branches of government to keep each other in check. It's taken a long time, but it's eroding. I mean, that's been clear. Where our civil liberties have been under attack for a long time. And, I think if you look at 9/11 specifically, that was an event where the Patriot Act is, that it's interesting how the names of these bills, they're always the opposite.
I'm aware of the Patriot Act. Yeah. It's interesting.
Yeah. So it's just those kind of things are almost everything that whatever they name it, just consider that it's most likely the opposite of what the name is.
Like the same as USAID. It's like,
yes.
It had nothing to do with aiding anything. It was a fucking Ponzi scheme. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And
worse
doing
than.
all kinds of, worse than, yeah. Cause it's like pushing these agendas all around the world of this, like really perverse kind of a sick cultural decline that we're in, and spreading it around the world. And it's just corruption, man.
Didn't they spend like $200 or $300 million on like transgender animals or something like that?
Dude, it's beyond ridiculous, like all the different things that were done through that. So I mean, that's why I got to say there's been some good things that have happened in the last year, but there's been some bad things too, and it's hard to know really what's actually going on. And that's why I say, like, I'm not going to let it ruffle my feathers like it used to. I mean, and that's different than coming to the defense of other people or whatever. It's just, there's just stuff. It feels like we're in we're living completely in a world of deception. So you really got to try to get off of the fluoride and all the toxic crap and do what you're saying, move your body, get your blood pumping, and these things, and battle it on all three fronts of physical, mental, spiritual, and connect with that inner voice, because for me, it's been more consistent, and I would say correct than the other noise that's out there all the time. You can just feel when they're gaslighting you and lying to you constantly. I mean, you could just, dude, I haven't even, whenever I go to a hotel when I would be on tour, since the 2007 to 2008 timeframe, if I go into a hotel room, I do not turn the TV on. I feel like I'm being violated. Like if there's a mainstream news on, if I go into somebody's house, my mom used to watch Fox News all the time, man. It drove me crazy when I would go over there, because it's like, she's a little old lady and she was lonely. Most of her friends and her, siblings and everybody's gone. So the TV was important to her, but every time you would see that when you're in an airport, and over here, most of the airports play CNN. It's just like, man, it's just toxic lies and manipulation. And it feels like I feel like I'm being violated. So I really don't want to engage in any of that stuff, man.
That's spot on. That's exactly how I feel about it as well. I mean, I very much feel like that about mainstream media, pretty much all outlets. I can't think of one where I'm like, I can trust you. There's none, because it's like, if they were trustworthy, they wouldn't have enough funding behind them to be in the position that they are. Okay.
Exactly.
And if they actually reported news neutrally, and the other thing is, I'm like that with advertisement. I mean, my fiance sometimes like laughs, she plays along with me, but I'm like crazy. Like, if we're watching like a film or something and an advertisement comes on, I have to mute the TV or like walk out the room or like turn it off, because I'm like, fuck you. I did not permit you to come into my living room, come into my space, pollute my fucking sound, you know, and my ears, you know, I don't want to know about you. Get the fuck out of here, you know. So I
yeah, man.
You know, I kind of yeah, and I have that attitude like 24/7 towards like pretty much everything, you know, because it is in one way or another, whether it invokes a positive or a negative style of reaction, it's still like it's, you know, taking your energy and your thoughts, you know, and obviously being a creative, you know, like one thought can spiral into a million other thoughts. So it's like, I don't want that, you know, I'm putting a wall here, you know, like you're not allowed into my space unless I tell you it's okay to do so. And same as, but like watching films as well, you know, you watch a film and then immediately start to see that, oh, they're essentially like, instead of being entertained, it's programming. Okay,
yeah.
you know, like it's programming you to think a certain way about the environment or about politicians or about like quote unquote toxic masculinity, and then immediately I fucking switch off. I'm like, okay, I don't want to hear nothing about this bullshit, you know. But anyway, not to swear so much, but
yeah, no.
You know,
hey man, I'm a freedom guy. Do you?
Yeah,
man. It's
yeah.
You know,
I just value boundaries, you know.
Yeah, dude, you have to in this age because it's like everything, and you're right, it's programming, and they tell you that, you know, and tell lie vision. It's just a lie. Everything's a lie. And then when you see, I mean, I'm not saying you can't enjoy a cool movie or whatever, a series or something. If you understand what's happening, then you can see it, and you can, I think you have the power to like be able to like, well, it's not going to hit me. I'm not going to let it influence me because I know what they're doing. Because you do actually see. I remember when there was a TV show, I forget, I think it was called Justified. It was like some sort of cowboy thing or whatever. And it was around the time that Ron Paul was running, you know, he ran in for 2007, he was on the campaign trail for the 2008 and for 2012. Mm-hmm. And they were all, you know, of course, like calling him whatever names, you know, anti-Semite, fascist. I mean, this guy's the most loving elderly gentleman that we have had in our political class in like so many years, dude. It's just unbelievable that they would say those kind of things. But then I saw this, an episode of this show. It shows these cops going into like a skinhead kind of a ranch or whatever. And there were like the right-wing extremists and all of the things. Criminal, it was like a gang of guys, right? And then so the camera pans through this ranch or wherever they were at, and they show a swastika up on the wall, and then on the desk there's the Ron Paul Revolution book is sitting there on the desk. So they put little things like in there to get, because then it reinforces the narrative that the media are always saying about whatever group or whatever's under attack at the time.
Sure.
And they do that kind of stuff. And it hits people that aren't aware at a subconscious level. They'll pick up on those things, and then they'll start to identify whoever's character is actually under attack as that's a real thing. So if you're aware, it's just like all of this stuff, even especially in the modern, like Marvel movies and stuff like that, which are things that I used to really enjoy. But if you see that, what the agenda is, I mean, you can still get enjoyment out of it, but understand they're planting seeds and putting a kind of an agenda there. And it makes, I think when whatever's happening on with the way I understand it, with the flicker rate on a screen for a typical television, when they're programming, they're getting you into a very suggestive level of consciousness to where they can implant these thoughts and these things into your head, and you get into sort of a hypnotic frame of mind, and then you allow that thing to be your reality. I mean, there's so many people that's what their world is. They get off work and come home and turn the TV on, and that's what they do every evening. And they're literally being programmed, and they're allowing that in, and focusing on things like sporting events. You know, I remember one time many years ago, I went with my manager to a soccer game in Berlin. And it was at the stadium, dude. And the people were just going mental over grown men kicking ball around. And I'm like, what? Where is this passion against the injustice that's being done on everyone? Like, why? How can you get so worked up over grown men kicking a round ball around on a grass field? And like, that's the most important thing ever.
Such a good point.
Meanwhile, you're like, you're being fleeced, your culture's being destroyed. You're like, it's unbelievable, man. And I was just astounded because I've been to, NFL games and stuff over here. And but there was another level of passion at a professional football game that I saw in Germany. I'm like, what are you guys doing? What's the priority here, man? What the hell's going on? So,
brother,
but
that is absolutely spot on. I've always thought the same thing, and it's the hijacking of our primitive mind, but for the sake of entertainment instead of enlightenment.
Yes.
Jon, brother, this has been literally one of my favorite episodes I think I've ever recorded. I've absolutely enjoyed talking to you so much, man, and
you too, man. It's been awesome. I hope we get to meet one day in the future. I wanted to ask you real quick, what are things like in the real world? It looks like things are going really bad in the UK from the stuff that I've seen. I don't really expose myself to social media very much, but I mean, is it getting better or no on the streets there, or when you talk to people, are they, what do you think?
Well, I think it's somewhat of a similar situation to the United States, or the divided states, I should say, at this point, unfortunately. But I think what's happening is basically, okay, so you've got a force that's kind of taking over. All right, you've got like sort of totalitarianism through the back door. Okay, They are putting us in a dangerous situation on purpose. It's not just incompetence. They've been putting us in a dangerous situation. Whenever they say they're gonna impose certain laws, like let's say just about the topic of immigration and all of that. When they say they're gonna impose certain laws, they do that, and then it's always the legal migrants that have to pay for that. By the way, okay, sure. That's the whole thing. I can be sat here talking about that for hours and hours, and then how on the other side you've got people that just come in and they're like whilst they're waiting for their status, they just roam the streets and they're culturally not compatible with the laws and the standards here. Some of them can't even speak the language, and obviously that's going to create tension for them. You imagine as a man, if you can't get a job, if you can't get a girlfriend, you're going to get pretty frustrated, and you might do some pretty stupid things, pretty violent things sometimes, especially if you're like in your 20s or maybe early 30s or whatever. Yeah. You're getting a lot of that. You get a lot of that happen over here, okay? So they're basically putting us in a dangerous situation. My verdict is that they're doing this, well, there's a number of reasons. There is part an Islamification of the country that's happening. On the other part, I think they're purposely putting us in danger to then impose digital ID, which I don't think they're far from doing that at all. They're trying to find whatever reason they can. And this has been a long-term game that they've been playing for a while. So in short, to answer your question, that's the situation with the UK. And I think there's something like, thousands and thousands of people getting arrested over social media posts and speeches. That's the kind of situation that you're dealing with,
that's what I've been seeing, but I was just wondering, does there seem to be any swell of a liberty movement there or no?
You know this yourself, Jon. Whenever something like that happens, it's usually hijacked by one of the pre-existing party forces.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. And
That's what's happening.
Yeah. And like there's various other parties here. Sometimes they'll like go for the same thing, but also the country is so goddamn divided. Like you've got the Islamo-communism thing of the Green Party, the Red and Green Alliance, which I will always be vehemently opposed to, considering my background and also my own stance on personal liberties and everything that we've already discussed. I think my values are pretty clear by this point.
Yes.
For what I believe in and what I stand for, Yeah, and on the other side of it, you've got reform, which I know people that are associated with it, but I think it's controlled opposition, and they kind of pander to like actual racists and like actual people who are bored, so they will go and like damage properties and things instead of holding government officials accountable. So I think the biggest problem with the UK is the fact that people are, like there are some things about the UK that I really like. There are some things about the attitude of the people that I absolutely adore. And it's the fact that you can't impose things on them in a direct way. Like they will not stand for it. They won't put up with it. Okay. I really like that about them, especially some of the older generation here. What I don't like is that there's also elements of complacency where they're just totally happy with how they're living their lives. And, it's just like, like change takes a very long time to happen over here, which on one hand you can say is a good thing. On another hand, is not such a good thing because at the rate that Islamism, I think, is taking over the UK, that's a big fucking problem, man, because that's how it starts. They'll start taking over the political seats and then the parliament and all of that. And you might say that, oh, but it's just a minority. It's only one person. It's only one person who's the mayor of London. It's only one person who's on the terrorist watch list that's about to become the mayor of Birmingham. It's only one person who's the mayor of New York. But then, before you know it, that's like the majority, okay? And then that's going to be a problem because when they talk about democracy, the democracy is going to represent the majority, isn't it? But then by that point, you'll have a fucking Islamic caliphate in place. And that democracy, the way it's used, when you got those kind of people in power, you're going to end up in real, absolute Orwellian shit. So
yes, they always turn that way.
Yeah.
Democracy always is the step before brutal tyranny. I mean, it's the way it is. So, I was hoping that there was something better going on there, but it just seems like it's almost too one of the things with your typical Western nation, and because most of the people are pretty good people, they sort of project their own goodness onto others and can't understand that there's really some insidious creep of real authoritarian agenda going on.
Absolutely.
And then that's how the let's call it the dark side gets control, because the people their minds don't work that way. They can't comprehend that there's that level of evil or deception that is really trying to foster and to grow. And it's simply a lack of understanding of history and being caught up in stuff that doesn't matter, whether it's entertainment or whatever. There's a lot of little elements to this, but I don't know, man. We're going to have to go through what we're going to have to go through, dude. So it's unfortunate the West has allowed this kind of stuff to happen, but it seems to be so.
For sure,
anyway,
man.
Dude,
yeah. I just try and encourage people to open their eyes to what is actually happening. But I think to really emphasize on the point that both you and I have been focusing on throughout this conversation is that violence as a result of outrage is not going to lead you to a good place, because ultimately that's actually going to lead to destabilization of whatever it is you're trying to protect, which will allow for that other thing that's the enemy to take over. As lame as the most layman terms I can display this, really. Yeah,
but it's true. I agree with you 100%, and that's why it's really important to get to have these discussions and to hopefully get some viewers on it that are going to understand and to resonate with, and just try to multiply people like us who realize that we're not alone, and that there are a lot of people that share the principles and ideals that you and I are talking about. There's a lot out there. It's just maybe they don't. Some people that share that, but don't even know that they do, because they're so kind of locked up in the matrix of the Madison Avenue false reality makers, that are trying to shove whatever product, whatever corporate goo down your throat that they're doing. The people just need to snap out of it. I see a big difference in terms of the amount of people that are aware of the Fed compared to 17 years ago. There's definitely more people that understand that. but I share your concern. Is it too little, too late? I don't know, but all we can do is just keep doing what we're doing. I mean, I think that's it. And I really, personally, I think that once we get the live and let live thing off the ground, I mean, we're crazy enough to believe that we can make a difference. So, we're going to try to do things and do different conferences and go around and speak to different communities here in the States and in Europe and the UK. I mean, at some point we'll be over there. So, we'll see. We'll see how freedom of speech looks.
Yeah, if you
I think you would definitely embrace the live and let live movement. In fact, man, I'm going to ask Dom to send me your personal email address if that's cool, and then you and I can be in contact. And I will when I think Mark is working on another final edit of the book, and then maybe I can have him ask him to send you a prelim copy of it, on a PDF so you can go through, because I think you'll dig it. I really do. I think you're gonna be down with it. I'm pretty sure you're a live and let liver just based on talking to you, man. I'm pretty convinced of that. So.
Absolutely, bro. I would love that. Yes, please. If you get the chance, we'll sort something out. So if you get the opportunity, and obviously if Mark's happy with it as well, I'd love to have a read through and see what you guys have put together. And this, because it definitely sounds like something I could get behind and support. But yeah, Jon, what a fantastic, brilliant podcast this has been. I've absolutely enjoyed it. This is exactly why I do this. So thank you for being a tremendous guest and a speaker. And also, I really, really on a personal level want to commend you on your humility, but also your sense of truth and just how you carry yourself, man. Like the shit that you've kind of gone through these last few years, but the fact that you carry such light with you, and there's not a single trace of doubt in your voice when you speak, man. I think that's such a powerful and valuable thing. So I'm very happy to have you here with us, and long may your journey continue to, not just for yourself, but to inspire others as well, man.
Well, thank you, brother. It's been a pleasure to speak to you. Absolutely. And I've been looking forward to it for the last few weeks for sure. And so I'm glad that we could connect, and we'll be in touch. And I really wish you the best, and for your family and for your people at home in Iran. I really hope that things go towards freedom for the people there. I really want that. My preference is for that for everybody around the world, because I really believe in my heart there's so much more. There's so many more of us than them, and that really are just common sense people wanting to live. And if we can just, allow ourselves to not be divided and conquered by all this deception, we can change the world, man. We have the ability to do that. These people are irrelevant. They have no power over me. Yeah, they can put me in a cage. They can kill me. So what?
Yeah.
Whatever. It's what it is.
Well, what they didn't realize is that they woke up a spiritual warrior. So.
Yep. Yeah, man. And many others.
I think that backfired.
Well, we'll see. I mean, it's I'm not, the thing is, because I'm at peace, it's whatever, I'm not going to do anything aggressive or offensive. No. But I'm going to speak. As long as I can speak, I'm going to speak and try to inspire and hopefully just, and learn from others. That's the key, is listening to other people and their points of view, and realizing, that because there's got to be a conversation. That's a big part of live and let live, is to understand and have rational discussions. There's some people are going to be totally unreasonable with, and you won't be able to have a conversation, but there are more of us that are reasonable out there. There just isn't really a great vehicle for us to be able to communicate and build a community together. And that's what we're going to try to do. And he's a genius, and he's an amazing human being. And there's a lot of good people already involved in it behind the scenes. And we're going to see once the book comes out and how it grows. And, we want to bring music into it and do a lot of different things. And so, we'll see. It's a step-by-step process, brother, but
absolutely,
anyway.
Brother. And we will get there. Thank you so much again for a fantastic talk. And to everyone else who's been listening as well, hope you guys enjoyed this one. Support Sons of Liberty, support Jon Schaffer, and keep an eye out on the Live and Let Live project that's happening. And we'll see you in the next episode of Iblis Manifestations.